Chapter 46-44. With the passing of time, Kangwu Taichung will never have day and night, and the ultimate divine power makes this the most perfect place to sit and realize. As the dojo of Kiting's ancestors, the avenue rules contained here are far beyond any place in the divine universe. This Kangwatai is equivalent to the Yunxiao Palace at the time of the Eternal God. And in the Palace of Eternal God Yunxiao, I heard that it is an unforgettable great blessing. Often, only the most shocking and brilliant genius in the universe has such a chance to hear the futon. This Kangwu Terrace, which is also an ancestor-level dojo, opened new doors and allowed these million monks to practice Taoism. In just a few months, all the monks of the divine universe have recovered from the trauma, but there are still tens of thousands of traumatized monks who died. At the same time, many monks broke through the shackles of the cloud mud and went straight into the supreme divine realm. And Jian Wushuang also woke up soon after, thinking that the original divine power that would be slightly lost not only did not wear at all, but was accompanied by a strange surging power. Jian Wushuang didn't understand it until the descendants of the Feng clan said vaguely that the endless breath of life in the meridian was originally the cause of the blood of the ancestral veins delivered by Fengxi. Shaking his head helplessly, Jian Wushuang was about to leave this circle, and Feng Qi, who was wearing a red flowing cloud and a shirt, appeared in front of him. Feng Qi's eyes lit up suddenly and hurried up to investigate with his palm. Jian Wushuang was embarrassed and quickly protected the bare chest. How is it possible? Obviously should be able to break through that kind of state. Feng Qi frowned slightly. After tidying up his clothes, Jian Wushuang said, "What are you talking about, mysterious?" Feng Qi didn't hide it, and said straightforwardly, "When you sent me blood before, I vaguely felt that your breath has reached the threshold of breakthrough, but now why are there no signs of breakthrough? Do you think the half-ancestor level is so good to break through? Which half-ancestor level is not immersed in the invincible realm for countless years, only to seize the chance?" Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled bitterly. "As for my promotion to the invincible supreme, 100,000 years. It may take a long time to achieve half an ancestor level." Feng Qi heard the words and subconsciously bulged and said, "It seems not difficult to be promoted to the half-ancestor level. I remember that I was asleep at first, and then became half-ancestor level." Jian Wushuang was dumb for a moment, and then nodded, crying and laughing. "Then I will try my best." Feng Qi said seriously, "You are different from others. My instincts are always accurate, and I am right." Looking at the inexplicable ancestor of the Phoenix family in front of him inexplicably, his mood was inexplicably relieved a lot. After saying goodbye to Feng Qi, Jian Wushuang stepped slowly on the grassy plain. Pure divine power fills every inch of space, giving people an unspeakable comfort. Time is pressing, and the failure of the battlefield outside the territory is equivalent to the divine universe completely opening the door to the virtual universe. Jian Wushuang had already made a decision, and when the injury of the old lord improved, he once again confronted the army of the imaginary army led by the imaginary god. And in this urgent time, the thought that had only appeared for a moment in my heart emerged again. Perhaps, should I really try to realize that kind of state? Jian Wushuang's eyes looked far away, where Qi Ting came with a warm smile. "Walk around together? All right. The two figures are here, leisurely wandering in the realm of Kangwatai, traveling through thousands of landscapes and watching countless rare and precious beasts. In the clouds, the two are like a fairy in the sky, sitting and watching the strange clouds in this realm. The mountains and the huge rivers stretch one after another, and the 4 seasons of spring, summer, autumn and winter are just transient. In this changing situation, Jian Wushuang's mood has already changed. I am a young person who likes to play alone. All kinds of rare beasts and famous mountains and giant rivers. I am happy to go and wait and see. Later, for various reasons, I have been practicing hard so far. Although my mood has changed a little, but only the fun has not changed. When talking about the past, cheating was a bit proud of satisfaction. So I simply moved all the things I liked before to this Kangwu Taichung. What you see is really real, yes, there really existed. Jian Wushuang smiled. being able to maintain his original heart as always, Brother Qi's state of mind has surpassed 99 people in the world. Qi Ting smiled loudly and looked at Jian Wushuang much softer. Once I was born in my own way. I was born into the heavens. Looking at Wan Yu was also a terrifying arrogance. But I didn't know until today that there is heaven beyond the sky. Jian Wushuang did not speak, waiting for the following. The Kangwutai realm that I created is tens of times larger than the Luodu star territory of my family, but it is like a sea of chestnuts in the eyes of Chaos Spring. Similarly, I also know my own insignificance, and my top realm is just reaching the ceiling of the rules. Speaking of which, Qi Ting paused and said, Wushuang Palace Master, do you think that the ancestor level is the real peak? Jian Wushuang only felt that the original cognition existing in his mind was even more confusing. The mysterious and vast land in the sad land, the strange words spoken by the snake in the extreme sea star field, the old deity that walked out from the Blackwater River, has been mysterious to the extreme phagocytosis. All these things are uplifting his original cognition. If the ancestor level is not the real peak, what else will it be on? He took a deep breath, and Jian Wushuang said slowly. Qi Ting heard the words and smiled loudly. I don't know. Jian Wushuang was dumb, and then shook his head, crying and laughing, which was really a big circle to return to the original place. But one thing is for sure, if you want to know more, you need to jump out of the rules that bind you. Qi Ting smiled. For example, you should break through now. Why set foot on half an ancestor? Jian Wushuang whispered softly. It is indeed time. Countless divine powers began to spontaneously escape from his body, like the branches and leaves of the vines, to stretch in the air. Qi Ting smiled slightly when he saw this, and his body withdrew from this world. Between the clouds and the clouds, thousands of red gold gods rose up from the sky. At this moment, all the monks of the divine universe in Kangwutai were shocked to watch the direction that fainted the entire sky into golden. The half-ancestor level testimony, the road flowing, Baoguang endlessly. This guy, is it really so crazy to save the divine universe? The Emperor Taishu, sitting cross-legged, slowly stood up, his eyes unchanged as before. Chapter 46-45. This heaven and earth testimony lasted only 10 years. And even the promotion of the Invincible Supreme took thousands of years. All monks shivered when they saw the sky dim. Did it fail? How could he fail? Nine Tribulation King, Feng Qi Bloodwave Supreme, etc. are all nervously looking at that direction. But for nearly 10 years, the lonely bamboo house that has never been opened once, the door was slowly pushed open, and the old man stood by the door, looking calm and calm. Qi Tingqi, who has gone to several battles with Jian Wushuang, has two brothers. Seeing the sky at this moment, he almost blurted out subconsciously, Brother Jian Wushuang, won't he fail? Qi Ting did not answer, with a faint smile on his face. If this fails, then he is not a person I approve of. The two looked at each other, and could get such an evaluation from the elder brother. It seems that this time Jian Wushuang should have succeeded. 10 years ago, the grass that was only a few inches long on the ground has now crossed the knee. The golden rhythm above the sky dome came, and went quickly, and it returned to normal in a very short time. A long wind blew through, and a cloud came, and the figure with clouds and smoke around him gradually appeared in everyone's eyes. It's just that the unbridled fairy-like air is like a cloud-like sea, but it makes Jingqi upper body, wearing only a pair of black trousers sword Wushuang, seems more prominent. Feng Qi chuckled and laughed out loud. In her recall, this guy seemed to particularly like bursting clothes every major moment. Afterwards, Feng Qi unfolded the flow of fire clouds behind his back, and took the lead in meeting Jian Wushuang. Here you are. Reaching for a white shirt of Confucianism, Feng Qi smiled and said, You guys can actually break through in such a short time. I really look down on you. After taking the white shirt and putting it on, Jian Wushuang smiled. Fortunately, that which escaped from Jian Wushuang's body no longer belonged to the invincible supreme power, but a kind of illusory cloud that could not tell the unknown. That is the kind of lingering cloud smoke, which is the proof of Jian Wushuang's achievement in Banzu. The originally calm atmosphere warmed up completely. The naive child rescued by Jian Wushuang in the self-empty universe stood at a distance and looked at this scene at the moment. Sister Lan Lan, you said that the smelly chest basket has reached a very realm, even more powerful than my master. Lan Lan smiled slightly and reached out to rub the hair bun behind the childish head. Yes, he is very powerful now. He can protect what he wants to protect. That's good. The childish face was satisfied. I hope that the stinky chest basket will always be stronger than my master, so that he can protect himself better. Lan Lan sighed for a moment and sighed for a long while. Sister Lan Lan, you said if I wanted to be a child of a stinky chest basket, would he want me? Relax, if there is such a day, he will definitely agree. A total of 970,000 monk army. After nearly 10 years of cultivation, Yuluo broke out of the customs and once again launched an attack on the army of the imaginary men who invaded the divine universe. The forever figure that always walks in the forefront of the army, every time it appears, is a real transformation. In the invincible state, you can hardly shake the existence of the half-ancestor level. Now that you are promoted to the half-ancestor, who else can stop him? Standing on top of the completely broken Luodu, Jian Wushuang looked back at the boundless army behind him, holding up the Tai Luo Excalibur in his hand. War! From the extraterritorial battlefield, it has almost extended to the hinterland of the divine universe. During the 10 years since the portal opened, it has already become a dead domain. The rules of the avenue are broken, and the luck is weak. I don't know why it was affected. The star field, which has been reduced to a dead area in a large area, no longer derives divine power. Instead, a weak virtual force is born. Jian Wushuang's eyebrows were tightened, and the luck of the divine universe has shrunk to the extreme in just 10 years. Even under the influence of the virtual universe, he began to be eroded. Xingye Qiyuan. While rushing to the extraterritorial battlefield, Jian Wushuang found nearly 10,000 troops with traces of virtual veneration in one of the Hengyang star domains that had been invaded by Su Shi. Jian Wushuang directly waved his hands to kill these 10,000 virtual lords, while leaving a 6-mark virtual venerable to ask about the current situation. Knowing that most of the elite universe is still stationed in the extraterrestrial battlefield, Jian Wushuang led the army to kill all the way. In order to completely destroy the universe of divine power, almost every 10,000 traces of virtual venerable form a unit, quickly eroding the living power. The Star Kingdom God Kingdom, that has been completely destroyed, is no fewer than tens of thousands. In the broken extraterritorial battlefield, the city of the original base camp has already been occupied by the army of Su Shi. Since the end of the Holocaust battle 10 years ago, the virtual has returned to the virtual universe and has been sleeping to this day. Although the Emperor Devourer also disappeared, his phagocytosis has always dominated the destruction plan. Wherever the phagocytosis has passed, any star field does not leave a live mouth. When the army of nearly 1 million divine forces once again set foot in the outer battlefield, the virtual venerable guarding here retreated. With one sword out, it seems that the sword-like waterfall that divides the world into two have surging out, and the entire base camp completely occupied by the Su Shi will be wiped out under this sword. The entire void field outside the territory trembles under this genie waterfall. Seeing that there were only less than 26 marks in front of him, Jian Wushuang put away the Tai Luo Excalibur and Shen Shengwei said, "Let your master raise his head and roll over to die." All the 6 marks Su Zun shuddered, and then turned around and fled. But the next moment, the huge crack hidden in the extremely dark, at the intersection of the two universes, slowly opened. 2 giant palms covering the sky with supreme fragility slowly tore apart the cracks. It was a demon ancestor with 4 horns and 6 black chains. The monstrous imaginary force surged, and under that deity ancestor, the imaginary came. That nightmare-like presence appeared. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath and stepped out in one step. The same powerful and unyielding divine power unfolded from the sky, and a pair of unparalleled treasures with sublime patterns of sublime expression emerged. This is a real collision between the half-ancestral divine power and the ancestral imaginary power. But the divine power is not suppressed but confronted. There is no sorrow and joy in the eyes of the false god, and there are endless traces of the virtual venom behind him, just like the demon from the 9 nether purgatory, covering the sky and the sun. The general trend of the divine power is gone. You arbitrarily lie in front of me, and I can leave you with a whole body. His cold voice resounded, not waiting for Jian Wushuang to speak. The demon ancestor behind the virtual had already raised his arms high and pressed toward the cover of Jian Wushuang. The giant palm surging the strange ciphertext covered the sky, but was repelled by a Qilin shout when it landed. The Kirin treasure with the power of the sun appeared behind the cheating, and the 3 strengths are full. Chapter 46-46. Wearing a Confucian shirt to hunt with the wind, Qi Ting looked indifferently to the false god. At this moment, he was like the king of Qilin, releasing the power of the ancestor to Yang. False god's gaze condensed, the supreme divine power of this middle-aged man surging all over his body. It is an ancestor. When did the divine universe have another ancestor class besides the eternal god? He was not allowed to think at all, and Jian Wushuang's sword, which was extremely sharp in the world, fell to his head. In 10 years he was promoted to Banzu. Only Jian Wushuang knows how grand the enlightenment he has gained. The unrestrained freedom in Kangwu Taichung has finally laid the way for Jian Wushuang to become an ancestor of all things. Jian Wushuang, who has been constrained by pressure and has grown up to the present, all he wants is guardianship. It was also the premature perception that had penetrated his own way, and everything was so natural that he went straight to the ancestor. Wushuang Kendo Zingahujianjian. The second form river. The infinite swordsmanship condenses into a long river of sword waterfalls, the most ordinary and the most powerful form, which lays the framework for the entire Wushuang Kendo. The vast and powerful sword spectrum flows up the river, facing the deity ancestor. Looking at the opponent who had been like an ant in the past, the sword was released, and it was faint that he felt a little throbbing at the moment. The imaginary waved his sleeves, and the celestial demon ancestor behind him roared, waving 2 giant arms full of chains to deal with it. The 2 are opposite. The sword waterfall is roaring and roaring, directly crushing and destroying the 2 arms of the demon ancestor. And then the castration is unabated, just like 1,000 swords hanging in the sky. At this moment, both the divine universe and the imaginary universe were shocked. With the power of half-ancestor, break the ancestral magic phase. The growth of Jian Wushuang has completely surpassed everyone's imagination. Even the blood wave supreme closest to Jian Wushuang is incredible. The heavenly demon ancestor mourned, and a huge amount of virtual force spewed out of his mouth, and countless vertical and horizontal sword intentions completely penetrated his body surface, which was completely dimmed. False god took a step back, and he looked at the figure in disbelief. It was only a decade away. The ants that could be eliminated with a wave of hand turned into what they are today. Without giving the Xushen any breathing opportunity, Jian Wushuang held his in the right hand together to outline a vast sword. With an invisible sword, a tangible trend emerges. He has no sword in his hand, but a sword in his heart. The vast swords are intertwined with each other like a dense net, and they walk towards the virtual god. Qi Ting followed. He smiled slightly, and behind him came the Kirin treasure phase, which turned into the power of the countless Daoyang to strangle the army of Su Shi. The power belonging to the ancestor level has long been beyond the reach of the venerable master. As soon as the power of the unicorn to the sun came out, the venerable master, who stepped into the divine universe, was 300,000. The destructive power of the ancestors is too terrible. Everything is born and died, and even the half-ancestors can only drink on the spot. The millions of troops that came out of the virtual universe were wiped out in more than half in just a moment. And just as Qi Ting was about to make another shot, since the cracks of that day, a horrible existence came out again. The emperor's crown above his head, dressed in black Jinhua costume, is like a dark master come here. His appearance made Qi Ting vigilant. However, the emperor's gaze did not stay beside him from beginning to end, but looked at Lao Zun. You did not die. With unwilling suppression of anger, resounded through the entire battlefield outside the territory. Lao Zun looked calm, and looked at Emperor Yen with a touch of disdain. Just like you want to kill me? A short sentence directly ignited the Emperor's emperor. The nothingness quaked, and 8 real shadows emerged from behind him. I can hit you once, and I can hit you a second time, waiting for the devouring of this king. The 8 real shadows are different in color, but their faces are exactly the same as the old ones. Just like the sudden darkness, each of them has a real shadow of ancestor-level strength and gallops. Qi Ting couldn't help it, and directly turned the thick Jiang divine power into a barrier of enchantment in front of the monk army. Boom! The combined effort of the 8 Daos Heniings easily tore the Qiang divine power of cheating, and went straight to the old deity. That terrifying power. Even cheating began to palpitate. Is that hard to understand terrorist power really ancestral power? On the other side, Jian Wushuang, who approached the false god with just one palm, seemed much easier. He seemed to be a fairy in the sky of Yunyi, and every blow that seemed to be fluttering was enough to cause serious damage to the virtual god. The false god, who could have shot him to death with a single palm, could only resist under the endless offensive at the moment. Probing with one finger, the invisible sword intention suddenly pierced the left shoulder of the virtual god. The blood of the ancestors fell, and his face was rueful. The most erroneous decision I made was to let go of your life. As soon as the words came out, Jian Wushuang's calm state of mind trembles. What are you talking about? False god's eyes were cold. I didn't expect that in just 10 years, you would grow to the point where you are today. If I knew that, I would definitely wipe you out. Suddenly, the final scenes of that catastrophe battle 10 years ago all came to mind. Jian Wushuang finally understood why he and Lao Zun were able to survive. It turned out that the virtual god's devastating blow pushed him away from him at the moment of the explosion. Taking a deep breath, Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, "Why do you do that?" False god smiled coldly. There will be a reasonable concern behind all unreasonable things, but I am still wrong. To make up for the mistakes I made, I will completely destroy you today. With the sound of a deep voice, the body of the virtual wrapped in black mist instantly lit up endless mysterious runes. Jian Wushuang only felt that a great terror between life and death surged into his heart. He almost turned sideways by instinct, and escaped several chains looted from the body of the virtual god. And the clothes on the left shoulder slightly touching the chain began to break quickly. Missed by one blow, the chain returned to the body, and the false gods with mysterious runes flashed in his eyes, with the fiery flame in his eyes, and he looked at Jian Wushuang from a distance. Virtual god, who almost carried the entire virtual universe with luck, was terrified at the moment. Even Jian Wushuang felt a life and death crisis when facing him. The destruction of the divine power universe is a foregone conclusion. Your appearance is only to add the last sadness to the divine power universe. I will remember you, but you must die in my hands. False god's eyes were scorching, and after finishing this last sentence, he no longer intended to speak. Since his innumerable mysterious runes gradually sublimated into the void, condensed into a strange array. Chapter 46-47. Deficiency is like a mist, falling from that ancient array. As soon as this vast and strange formation came out, both the Supreme and the Void felt that the power in their own bodies had weakened to a certain level. It is that even Wushuang Fei feels the divine power in his body, and is depressed by an unknown force. The virtual force spread out, the vast array above the virtual god's head. Countless chains emerged from his body, with a breath of destruction, scattered in all directions. The patriarch White Ape only felt that a crisis of life and death was coming. He almost subconsciously pushed the overlord hundreds of meters away. The chain with ancestral power easily pierced through the ape of the White Ape, and even with the spirit of the soul was about to die. Ancestor, the overlord wanted to rush over, but stopped drinking more than the White Ape. Don't come here. There was blood in his mouth, and the White Ape's figure was quickly turning into powder. He looked at the overlord's eyes full of reluctance. Live well, wait for you to win, and take the old man back. At the end of the speech, The white ape sprinted into the army of Su Shi at the last moment of nirvana. Boom! The magnificent martyrdom ripped a crack through the army, and the 6-spotted virtual virgins fell into the accident with a slight accident. Qi Ting shot, covered by the power of the sun, and then reluctantly repelled the chain that was coming to the sky. The sword has no two sides to sink like water, and no longer cares whether the imaginary has changed or not. Directly condenses the invisible sword and slashes towards him. The vast sword ascends, and the sword-like streamer is like the Tianhe covering the false god. There was a loud grin resounding, and then the 2 giant palms covering the sky directly separated the Jianhe River. And at the same time a huge head of a demon ancestor's ancestors could not help biting the sword. He couldn't escape, and the whole figure was swallowed by the demon ancestor. Looking into the eyes, the endless black mist trapped his entire person in the belly like a chain. This devil ancestor established its own rules, and ate the sword Wushuang's divine power at a very fast speed. The demon ancestor closed his mouth in satisfaction, and then lay prone behind the virtual god. Feeling the weaker struggle within the ancestors, the false god finally let go of his heart. He looked not far away, where Qi Ting had already manipulated the power of Jiyang, the same as the ancestor-level breath, so that the false god dare not carelessly spit out the master of Wushuang Palace. Qi Ting looked ashen blue. Otherwise I would blame this seat to kill you on the spot. Like hearing the best jokes in the world, Su Shen sneered. I don't quite understand that you have become an ancestor. Why should you care about this little half-ancestor? There was a flash of light in Qi Ting's eyes, and then he no longer spoke, waving his arm, and a Qilin Baoxiang, who was surrounded by the power of the sun, roared and attacked the false god. Seeing the demon ancestor behind him, he directly waved 2 giant arms and smashed it against Qilin. There was a huge tremor on the battlefield, and the light wave generated by the collision of the virtual force and the divine power will illuminate the extremely dark. False god and cheating each took a step back, and when the Qilin treasure phase finally dissipated, he severely broke the arm of the demon ancestor. Release the master of Wushuang Palace, otherwise the next broken arm will not be your ancestor's arm. Qi Ting said in a low voice. The false god didn't speak. Just as he was about to start again, the demon ancestor behind him suddenly shuddered. At the next moment, a long river of swords and waterfalls rushed out through the body, exploding the entire head that covered the gods and gods. At the same time, a figure floating around the body with a pattern came out of the sword. The Tailuo Excalibur pointed at the earth diagonally, and the sword Wushuang proudly looked at the void god, then lifted the Tailuo Excalibur and hacked it. This sword is unstoppable. The demon ancestors shattered directly, and the false raised his hand to resist. Qi Ting saw that Jian Wushuang was intact, and was overjoyed, manipulating Jiang divine power to roar the false god. This blow destroyed even the nothingness, like a black hole that engulfed everything, absorbing any divine and imaginary forces scattered in the universe. All the supreme and vain slayers who are fighting are looking at this scene in shock. When the light dissipated, in the collapsed void, the left arm was destroyed, the chest cavity opened a miserable virtual god, and he slowly took a step forward. Supreme supremacy dissipated, and he couldn't even continue to repair his broken body. Jian Wushuang lifted his sword and looked deep into his eyes. If in the last Holocaust battle, the false god hurt the killer, then he and Lao Zun absolutely had no hope of surviving. But in the end, he somehow released them from the emperor's hands. No one spoke first. Even though the body was mostly broken, the false god remained upright, and the anyway in his eyes never changed. I just want to ask a word. Obviously we are dead enemies. Why did you let us go? Jian Wushuang did not take the next step, questioning the virtual with a voice that only the two of them could hear. There is no reason. The occurrence of this scene today is caused by my own hand. My biggest mistake is to underestimate your growth. Su Shen looked at Jian Wushuang, saying one by one, your terrible growth is far beyond my expectations. Without talking, Jian Wushuang already understood a little bit. Why did the false god give him his life? But everything has already happened, and no one can change. An invisible sword wrapped around the red gold pattern emerged from his hand. The sword was unparalleled. You should know the next situation. I can't kill you. The calm face of the false god raised the corner of his mouth. My life is not so good, even if it came. Jian Wushuang is also calm and abnormal. If he pulls his neck to kill, then he is not a false god. Incarnation of the sword intention. The infinite Kendo Changhong is like a river, swooping towards the virtual in a flash. No! The emperor biting emperor, who was being haunted by Lao Zun, screamed loudly. He wanted to help Jian Wushuang, but he couldn't let go. He could only watch Jian Wushuang's sword as if he had entered the unmanned realm and pierced the false god. Poof! A sound of gold iron into the meat resounds. The unrivaled river of Kendo poured into the chest of the virtual god, destroying his ancestral source. Without any dodge, he stood at the same place and let the Wushuang's long sword pierce. Jian Wushuang was shocked in his heart. If the false god fights hard to resist, then the best situation is that the false god dies, and he is seriously injured. But the virtual did not resist. But after the sword of Wushuang's long sword pierced his body, he extended his hand to grasp the blade and pushed it forward. The monstrous imaginary power collapsed, and the avenue belonging to the imaginary was irreversibly collapsed. Supreme luck began to overflow from his body and fed back to the virtual universe through the cracks of the day. All the venerable masters who are fighting desperately feel that the imaginary is about to die, and all look desperately at the imaginary god. Jian Wushuang, I'm lucky to destroy my ancestors. I just want to ask you something. Chapter 46-48. The figure of the false god decomposes at a slow speed, and then turns into stars and constantly vanishes. Everything starts with me, and ends with me from now on. I am dead, and you must not hurt my imaginary universe. And the imaginary universe will live forever and never step into the divine universe. False god looked at Jian Wushuang, hoping to hear a promise from his mouth. Jian Wushuang didn't speak, but his eyes were calm, and he suddenly thrust the invisible sword into the body of the virtual god. What do you think of the divine universe? Do you think you can redeem all your past sins? Then my divine universe goes back hundreds of millions of years. What should they do to resist all of you who died? Words are like knives crying like blood. Jian Wushuang's left hand suddenly pulled out the Tailuo Excalibur, pointing to all the virtual respects in the battlefield outside the territory. All the venerable tremors shuddered fiercely, and the shadow of death enveloped everyone's heart. The imaginary god stared at Jian Wushuang stunnedly. He realized that the person in front of him, who had stepped into the universe of the imaginary universe from the beginning, and had a battle to the last moment, was his final enemy. Unconsciously, this short growth of 100,000 years made him a terrible, hard-blooded, and cohesive existence than the eternal god. When true, Su Shen's eyes gradually lost their look. The sword has no two-sided color and calm, and the words are like a hammer. To prevent such a tragedy from happening again, one of your virtual universes is counted as one, and it will be destroyed. The false god shivered and looked at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. No, you can't. Jian Wushuang did not speak, and his face was as calm as before. He didn't want too much nonsense. When he was about to draw out the invisible sword, the cold palm of Shushan directly pulled Jian Wushuang's arm. Seeing the dense runes suddenly popping up on the forehead of the virtual god, Jian Wushuang was startled, and he was ready to leave. But everything was too late. Jian Wushuang only felt that the whole body space became sticky, as if stepping into the quagmire made him unable to move at all. In order to avoid the annihilation of the imaginary universe, I can only seal you in the chaos of time and space. Behind the imaginary god, a huge vortex appeared in the broken space. Jian Wushuang desperately wanted to leave, but to no avail. Do you think that I will be sealed in the chaos of time and space? I can't come back. The figure of the false god nearly dissipated, and he shook his head. I don't think I can trap you forever, but if I can make you sink there, it is my last effort. Dark and shameless guy, Jian Wushuang said angrily. After saying this, his figure completely disappeared into the chaos. After doing all this, the figure of the false god turned into a large amount of smoke, and his godless pupil looked at the broken dome and murmured softly in his mouth, "You will never be the master here. You are just a passerby, never knows the passing passerby." At this point, the Lord of the imaginary universe, the nightmare imaginary of the divine universe, has just died. And Jian Wushuang was also pushed into the chaos of time and space. At this moment, all the venerable virtues are like a walking dead, and there is no longer the idea of struggling to fight. Only less than 300,000 monk troops are left, led by Feng Qi and Long Yin Long Qi, and others strangled the virtual respect. Seeing this situation, the emperor bite, his heart is ashes, and the 8 real shadows return to the body, releasing vast energy to separate the old venerable, and they want to escape. Lao Xun did not stop. A black water scepter appeared in his right hand, and then threw it towards the emperor. The black water scepter is as fast as electricity, and even the emperor can't avoid it, and is directly penetrated. Even the sound did not come out, and the emperor devourer fell into the void without any sound. Only the remaining members of the phagocytic tissue immediately supported the Emperor Yin to plunge into the cracks of the day, fled into the virtual universe, and disappeared. The battlefield outside the territories died for a short period of time, and the most elite virginity of the nearly 1 million virtual universe looked desperately at everything in front of him. Lao Xun slowly descended from the void, hunting in the wind with a black water robe. The huge fire wings behind Feng Qi's exhibition came behind Lao Xun. At the same time, Long Yin Long Qi, Shuebo and others also stood behind Lao Xun. Although few people in the Divine Power universe heard Lao Xun speak, everything he has done for the Divine Power universe has already been imprinted in everyone's heart. Looking at the extraterrestrial battlefield in front of him, there are still millions of vain soldiers. The Elder Xun slowly said, "No one stays." No one had any objections. Feng Qi took the lead to lead the descendants of the Feng family, who had been less than 1,000, and turned into a giant phoenix to carry out the final extermination. The 2 half-ancestors of Long Yin and Long Qi followed closely behind, and also plundered into the army of Su Shi. Blood Sovereign Supreme also descended into the army of Su Shi, full of grief and revenge. When the last Mark-level virtual Venerable Nirvana was destroyed in the battlefield outside this domain, the 2 sides of the universe, involving nearly 100,000 years of the Holocaust battle, declared the end. So far, the divine universe that participated in the battle of the catastrophe left only less than 200,000 supreme. The virtual universe has nearly 10 million elite virtual respects and none survive. The entire battlefield outside the region was completely transformed into a burial ground, and the debris overlapped a few feet high, tragic to the extreme. This battle, from the beginning of chaos to the present, from the highest ancestor-level eternal God, down to all the celestial princes and supremes, all died out. Continuing the havoc of countless chaos era, this is the end. No one knows what the significance of this war is. The war has reached such a point that it is already a tragedy, has been completely annihilated in the extraterritorial battlefield of nothingness. The wind whimpered and wept. The surviving supremes, without the rejoicing after the victory, all looked silently at the place where Jian Wushuang disappeared. The old man stood calmly from beginning to end. Everyone looked at him nervously. In the end, Blood Sovereign Supreme stepped forward and asked, "Senior, can Wushuang Palace Master return from the turmoil?" Old Master slowly opened his eyes and shook his head. "I don't know. Don't he come back? I don't believe it," Feng Qi said anxiously. Everyone's mood has fallen into the bottom. The chaos of time and space opened with the power of the ancestors, and no one knows what terrible consequences. Those with weaker consciousness may be lost in it forever. Everyone looked sad. Only Kiting's eyes flashed with regret, and his face was extremely blue, as if he had lost one of the most precious things. "Let's go," Qi Ting snorted, and directly led the Qilin tribe of less than 1,000 people to leave the foreign battlefield. Qi listens to Qi, and there are 2 people. After arching their hands and saying goodbye, they followed behind Qi Ting and plunged into the divine universe. Both Bloodwave Supreme and Dragon and Phoenix are Qilin tribes with strange faces looking away. Chapter 46-49. This horrific battle, which lasted for countless chaotic eras, was finally ended at the cost of the virtual god's death and the dire victory of the divine universe. The supreme power of the two universes has been wiped out in this war. Even if it is more than 1,000,000 chaos, it will be difficult for the two universes to return to their pre-war state. The world is clear. There is no more war to fight. The black water was rippling, and the old lord seemed to be aging to another level. He turned and looked at the more than 200,000 lords behind him, slowly speaking. I will sleep here. Maybe I will wait until his return, only then will you wake up. So go back to your own. Sword Wuxia, which has become the backbone of the divine power universe, has now completely disappeared in the chaos of time and space, resulting in even the divine power universe as the victorious party finally ending in dismal. As early as before, every supreme knew clearly that if Jian Wuxia did not die, then at the moment, they would counterattack the imaginary universe and carry out a thorough liquidation, instead of ending like this now. But if there is no, everything cannot be changed. Counterattack the imaginary universe. We want revenge. The Supreme roared resoundingly. Immediately afterwards, nearly 200,000 Supreme Masters shouted at the same time. Counterattack the virtual universe. Leave no one. Bloodwave Supreme, and others looked at the old master. Lao Zun turned a deaf ear. His figure drifted forward, and then turned into a long river of black water, floating in this broken void outside the battlefield. In the end, the battlefield ended bleakly. Nearly 200,000 Supreme people had 50,000 Supreme people belonging to the Palace of Life, and the remaining nearly 150,000 Supreme people came to Skyrim. The dragon and Phoenix's vitality was badly injured, and the Supreme Divine Realm almost disappeared. Almost 70% of the various sects came to destroy the sect, and there was no one else. Taishu Divine Emperor stood in the place where Jian Wuxia disappeared for 100 years. During this century, there were no other disciples in the Divine Palace of Life, except the battlefield outside the territory. Taishu Divine Emperor seems to be thinking about what kind of existence this guy is. He seemed to be born in heaven, appeared quietly, grew up from a very humble existence, and then led the divine universe from decline to complete victory. After the complete victory of the divine universe, he suddenly disappeared without a trace, as if he had already completed the task entrusted to him by heaven. This is a ranger, and like a passerby, leaving only a shadow, and never meet again. 100 years later, Taishu Divine Emperor left with a laugh. Under the leadership of Bloodwave Supreme and Great Axe Supreme, less than 1,000 disciples have worked together to build the Shrine of Life at the entrance of the Divine Power Universe to the extraterrestrial battlefield and stay there. At the same time, the news of the victory of the Divine Universe spread in a very short time. But there is no universal celebration, because every surviving Star Kingdom fuckingdom, the powerful in the Supreme Divine Realm, is almost dead. Along with the news of the great victory of the Divine Universe, there is another news. The ancestor of the Chilan tribe cheating broke through the ancestors in times of danger, saved the Divine Power Universe in times of danger, and led all the Supremes to fight against death, and finally annihilated the imaginary to win a terrible victory. At the same time, the old calendar was dismantled, and the new era was opened. Qi Ting built Kangwatai in the broken Luodu to replace the reality of the eternal god. Kangwatai became the dojo of the new eternal god Cheating. A series of news came out in the divine universe, spreading all over the world. At the same time, the most important news came out. To commemorate the great victory of this Holocaust battle, the new eternal god Cheating opened the dojo. Any supreme divine realm can come to listen to the Taoist realm, and even each star territory kingdom can send 10 ultimate dominions. Come listen to Dao Sit. As soon as this news was released, countless star territory gods were crazy. This is the new eunuch's wide openness. It is only a matter of time before he can hear from the ancestral seat and be promoted to supreme divine realm. Just wide opening the dojo, let the remnant Xingyu divine kingdom spell out the words and gladly go to the pilgrimage. For a time, within 100 years, the top arrogance in the divine universe went to Kangwatai to see the new eternal god cheating. Why not? It's shameless. A loud clap of table sounds resounded from the newly built Shrine of Life. Blood Sovereign Supreme had to send his hair upright. Looking at the urgent message from Kangwu Taichung in front of the table, he broke his mouth and scolded. The shameless man who sells fame and reputation steps on the bones of millions of monks in my divine universe. The Great Axe Supreme is also ugly, even with nearly 50,000 disciples of Life Shrine, filled with righteous indignation. The King of Nine Tribulation rushed out immediately and was stopped by the Supreme Axe. Elder Nine Tribulation, don't get angry first. I want to seek justice for Sword Wushuang. Suppressing the rage in my heart, the King of Nine Tribulations said in a deep voice, and he had reached the breadth of invincible supremacy, making him like a sword with a sharp edge. Blood Sovereign came to the King of Nine Tribulation and put his palm on his shoulder, saying, "Now the divine universe is a waste of life. It can no longer stand any toss, so let's bear with it." After taking a deep breath, the Nine Tribulation King only entered a deep retreat after entering a closed retreat, and never went out again. Since today, the Palace of Life is closed, and all the Kirin tribes will not see it. Bloodwave Supreme said in a deep voice. Noah, more than 50,000 disciples of Life Shrine bowed in unison. Since then, the Shrine of Life has been closed. An urgent message sent from the Kirin tribe to various denominations flows through the divine universe. In the Qishao star field, an urgent news from the Qilin tribe lay in front of him. But Feng Qi didn't even open his eyes. In the giant palace, nearly 10,000 descendants of the Phoenix family stood on both sides, looking at their ancestors in awkwardness. Old ancestors, the descendants of the race who dominate the upward race, have all come together. The handsome young man named Feng Xiao stepped forward. Feng Qi slowly opened his eyes. Meimu scanned every descendant of the Feng clan in the hall, and said quietly, "Since today, the Feng clan has closed the star field, and no one should go out without permission." Which kid who doesn't open his eyes can't stand the temptation to go to Kangwatai? Doesn't blame this guy for having a bad future? In the giant palace, all the descendants of the Phoenix tribe responded in unison. In addition, tell the guys of the Dragon clan that if one of their clan dares to go to Kangwatai to listen, the whole Feng clan will endure with it. Feng Zhu's magnificent appearance, her eyes turned to the distant void, and her eyes finally flashed a bit of sadness. In the same year, both the dragon and the phoenix closed the star field at the same time, and no one went to Kangwatai to listen. Taishi Temple, Starry Sky Sect, Judy Pavilion reorganized after the war, Jiuxing Holy Land, Sword Alliance, and the rest of the ancient ancestors who participated in the War of Holocaust, all declared closed in the same year, but they did not send a person to hear. This is unheard of in any era. Chapter 4650. Nearly 300 years since the disappearance of Jian Wushuang, almost all the clans sent by the clan have reached the territory of the Kirin clan, and now the center of the entire divine universe Kangwatai. It was still thousands of miles away, but all the monks who came here felt a vast supreme power. Everyone's face is filled with excitement, and the kind of supreme avenue they feel is the ancestral atmosphere. Nearly 1 million monks have come to Kangwu Terrace from all directions of the divine universe. The majestic hall is like a building made of spirit jade, and the vast divine power exuded nourishes every monk who came here. A group of 10 people from Taitsong God Pavilion came to Kangwu Station and stopped to stop. They all belonged to the ultimate dominion. In the Battle of the Catastrophe, the Taitsong Shen sent all 5 Supreme God Realm Elders of the clan to participate in the battle. 4 people died in the battlefield, and only 1 top Supreme remained, returning seriously. "Brother, you said that we should come to hear from the elders of the second elder. Will it be okay when we go back?" One of the chunky monks said nervously. "If anyone dares to come, break their legs." The headless monk frowned. "Idiot, you do'n't say I do'n't say, the second elder can he know? Besides, we just listened to the elders before we came here to listen to the doctrine, and break our legs. And also break the legs of the elders." The only female disciple in the team of more than 10 people in this line, looking around for a week, only whispered, "Brother Master, Brother too, have you found that the monks who come here are the ultimate masters? I haven't watched, there are a few supremes." The master coughed heavily and then whispered, "Wouldn't that be better? Later, when Eternal God opens Kangwatai, we will try to grab the most advanced futon." At this point, they were all excited, and the Eternal God listened to it, which was almost equivalent to giving each of them an entry ticket to break through the Supreme. Only the female disciple scratched her head in doubt. In the middle of the original broken Luodu star field, there are 3 figures standing at the moment in front of the chaotic spring that was waved and conquered by Lao Zun. Qi Ting, still dressed in white in a Confucian shirt, stood at the front, and behind him stood Qi Ting and Qi Gong. The Qi Ting, as if it were the same as before, had a supreme ancestral atmosphere floating around him. He frowned tightly at the chaotic spring that had been sealed by the black water without a word. I didn't know how long it was before he asked quietly, "How many monks have the outside world come to?" When Yen, Qi Ting and Qi Gong glanced at each other, and then stepped forward. "Brother, there are nearly 3 million monks who have come to Kangwu Terrace. They are all the ultimate dominion. As for the supreme powerful come, less than tens of thousands." "Asshole, a bunch of things," Qi Ting shouted angrily. A hazy breath that did not match his previous temperament rose from the bottom of his eyes. This seat begged them in such a low voice that they were so ignorant and exaggerated. With strong tolerance and resentment, Qi Ting's eyes grew cloudy. Turning around, the shadowy color in his eyes had disappeared, replaced by generosity and kindness. "2 younger brothers, you are already my closest people. I have no one to trust except you." Qi Ting sighed and stopped talking. Qi Ting and Qi Gong heard the words and said, "Big brother, if you have anything, just tell us that our 3 brothers don't know each other." Qi Ting focused on the head, and then said, "Since this is the case, then the eldest brother can only let you come forward once. Please invite the supreme and half-ancestors of the Life Temple, Longfeng and other tribes to Kangwatai. I want to compensate them once. After all, this time I was wrong first." "Relax, brother. No matter what, our brothers and sisters will definitely invite them in full to show my true sincerity of the Qilin tribe," Qi Ting firmly said. "It's not too late. We must rush before your brother to enlighten me. Please ask them come." After the words were over, the 2 left. Looking at the disappearing back, the cloudy look emerged from Qi Ting's eyes again, which was extremely inconsistent with his ancestral status. The whole broken Luodu starfield still maintained the previous situation. Looking at the chaotic spring under his feet, Qi Ting turned his eyes to his left arm again. At the next moment, he suddenly raised his right hand and pointed like a knife, cutting off his entire left arm directly from the shoulder blade. "What?" With a groan of pain, Qi Ting's right hand caught a complete arm. The blood of the Supreme spewed out from the broken stubble, but Qi Ting did not care at all, and let the blood of the gods infuse the shirt, just like a horror demon. Looking at the arm that was still trembling in his hand, monstrous hatred appeared in Qi Ting's eyes. "Damn Sword Wushuang. You were originally the most perfect body I was going to cultivate, but it disappeared silently, which made me so much trouble. If you appear in front of me again, I will surely stab you." The blood of the gods gradually dissipated, and at the same time the broken left arm regrowed. Qi Ting was as quiet and free as before Qi Yushuan. And the broken arm, I don't know when it changed its appearance. It turned into a flesh-colored small furnace inscription with dense patterns. "I can't wait any longer. Let you first contribute some nutrients to my mud tires." Qi Ting smiled sullenly, and he suddenly opened his arms like a hug, rising above the void. Kangwatai, which has been built into a majestic giant hall, at this moment, slowly opened the vast gate. Plenty of pureness reached its extreme power, and all the monks who rushed to Kangwu Terrace were bathed in this power. Every monk felt the shackles loosely. Roar! The roar that shook through the ages, a unicorn with the power of pure yang came. And on that Kangwatai the huge treasure of Kiting's solemn dignity appeared. "All the people of the divine power universe, I attacked the heavenly Tao, in order to save the divine power universe in fire and water, and qualified for the position of the eternal God. Today I open the dojo, and open the Tao futon to give the supreme opportunity. As cheating Wei's voice fell, the door of Kangwatai Giant Hall was completely opened. Please sit down. All the monks are crazy. They come in desperation, just to grab the futon nearest to the eternal God. 10 people in Taitsong Shenge are in the back of the crowd. Everyone's face is eager, fearing that they cannot grab a futon. Only the female disciple, who was guarded in the center by the brothers, had some doubts. I don't know if it's an illusion or a trance. She accidentally saw the eternal God, sitting on the giant hall of Kangwatai. There was a little weirdness in the divine and vast breath. Chapter 46:51. Shook his head slightly, and the female disciple of Taitsong Shenge realized that eternal God was looking at them while looking down on them, and hurriedly lowered his head. Brother Master, Brother too, let's go back here. Hesitating again and again, the female disciple gritted her teeth and said, When I heard it, I was in a hurry. I said, Juling, what kind of pigheads are you crazy about now? Do you know how hard this entry ticket is now? You are kidding on your way. The female disciple named Jiuling gritted her teeth, and at the next moment she suddenly turned around to squeeze the crowd away from Kangwatai. Sister, come back soon. Master and others shouted anxiously, but when she saw that she had decided, she had to repent. In the crowd of monks rubbing their shoulders, Jiuling looked back at them, and then resolutely left. Hope this is just my random guessing. Nearly 3.5 million monks poured into Kangwatai. Every unknown piece of spirit jade at his feet radiated magnificent divine power, and the monks walked into it, feeling that the body was nourished by a certain mysterious energy. This huge Kangwatai Giant Hall is like a borderless star field, with countless ancient stars on top of his head, which looks very mysterious. And in this vast Kangwatai Great Hall, where there is a lot of clouds and smoke, Wandua lotus stands in each other, and in the center of the largest lotus stand on one side, sits a cheating with a stream of Confucian shirts. Avenue of heaven and earth appeared like a colorful shadow behind him. All monks only felt a kind of repression from the heaven and earth avenue, and then there were nearly 3.5 million monks in total. At the same time, they bowed their heads and called piously. Qi Ting smiled all over, waving his sleeves. The supreme divine power turned into thousands of rainbow shadows, and plunged into each monk's body. At this moment, all the monks only felt that the illusory realm was wide open, just like a floodgate flooding and sitting on the spot. A magnificent huameng rose from the sky, reflecting the entire interior of the Kangwatai Giant Hall like the day. And when these monks were promoted, Cheating, who was sitting on the lotus platform, flashed a shadow, and next a slap-size flesh-colored small tripod came out of his sleeve. The flesh-colored furnace tripod rose in response to the storm, and it grew to tens of thousands of miles in the blink of an eye. All monks looked at the miracle subconsciously. At this moment, no matter how far or near the star field, most of the stars began to flow towards Kangwu Taichung, and then fell into this flesh-colored small tripod. The bright and weird huameng began to rise from the furnace, and turned into a cloud of smoky clouds towards the ground. All monks felt that everything in front of them was like a heavenly wonderland, and they were lost unconsciously. In a trance, they only felt that there were countless red-crowned white cranes in front of them in the wind, leading them to testify. In this way, nearly 3.5 million monks floated into the air, and then fell into the abyss-like flesh-colored furnace tripod. In an instant, the world changed dramatically, with the entire Kangwatai as the center, and the situation changed suddenly. Everything around the Luodu star field, nearly 50,000 star fields died together in this strange change, and the world cried. Cheating sits on the lotus platform, still looking at this scene with generous benevolence, a ray of power that is not divine but far more powerful than divine, floating from his body. Accommodated millions of monks. Flesh-colored furnace tripods mixed with countless stars kept trembling, and at the same time a line of blood marks began to fill up the gutter pattern on the furnace tripod. No screaming, no wailing. Everything seemed to be immersed in heavenly wonderland until the last moment of demise. When the flesh-colored furnace tripod no longer trembles, all the visions of heaven and earth are silent. Then, the flesh-colored hearth slowly changed, and eventually turned into a flesh without 5 features and 7 know-how. Qi Ting waved a hand, and the strange body was shrunk into the hands. Next time your facial features should grow out. Qi Ting grinned. And it is also time to break this invisible bondage. The natural tremor, Juling, who had been far away from Kangwu Station, hurriedly fled after he noticed these strange changes. But the invisible suction was too terrifying, and she could not move the half-spoiled form with her ultimate. On this occasion of 1,000 times, a unicorn roar sounded, and at the same time, a force of the sun pulled her body, and then rescued her from the suction. In the huge spaceship, she listened to Jiuling. I said, girl, the dojo is closed, shouldn't you haven't entered yet? Jiuling was afraid to speak at all, and looked at the thousands of Qilin tribes in the spaceship in horror. Aren't you thinking of us as bad guys? We are all relatives of Eternal God, but not bad guys. Qigong laughed. He was inexplicably interested in this woman, who was full of horror. However, Jiuling just hurriedly thanked her, and then fled the spaceship. Second brother, please go back first, I will go and I will return. After leaving this sentence, Qigong quickly followed Jiuling's footsteps. Qi shook his head helplessly, and then took the spacecraft to return to the Kangwu station that had changed. Where is? I remember I fell into the black abyss, don't I die? Weird whimpers and whispers came from S ears, and they were almost torn into 2 sections by the turbulent wind, slowly waking up. The blood scab formed by the condensed blood of the whole body was torn by the wind and time in the chaotic flow of time and space, unable to heal. And he had become a blood man. Almost cannot see the original appearance of the sword Wushuang, just like a skeleton with flesh, staring blankly at the erratic time and space turbulence. I'm not dead, then how should I go back? He raised his footsteps and walked in this unknown time and space like a walking corpse. It is not known how many years. The most terrifying turbulence in time and space is the unknown. There are no space-time coordinates here, and some will always be just ridiculous areas and winds that can easily tear the body. But Jian Wushuang never despaired. He just walked firmly in this chaos. I don't know how much time has passed. When he was completely numb, a faint light spot hidden in the turbulence appeared in his eyes. Jian Wushuang almost didn't think about it, reached out and touched it. Suddenly, thousands of silk rhythms burst into the sky, like stirring the water surface, startled the ripples. Then the silk streamer emerged like a dense net, directly absorbing the entire figure of Jian Wushuang. The mind is turning around, and I don't know the geometry of the world for a while. Boom! A beam of light resembled a meteor in the daytime, crossed a white line from the sky, and then fell heavily to the ground. Chapter 4652. Even if it is the soft ground again, it is almost the same as Jian Wushuang's already weak life. The meridian root bones of the whole body broke at the moment of landing. The true soul and spirit were almost thrown out with their brains, entered the ground for nearly 100 meters, and smashed into a crater soared Wushuang in a radius of 10 miles. At this moment it was almost impossible to lie on the ground and move his fingers. The bone was almost broken into powder, and he was already paralyzed, even swallowing his throat. But fortunately, his spirit is still there, so he will not step into the realm of reincarnation. As long as the soul is immortal, even if he only has 1 hair and 1 piece of skin, he can regenerate the body again. At the same time, he began to feel that what filled his body was no longer divine power, but another rule, another power. The kind of power that does not completely melt into the body has far exceeded the divine power, almost higher than the unknown geometry. He was completely shocked. What is this place? Is he not returning to the divine universe? Jian Wushuang wants to explore the situation around him at this moment, but the only thing he can do is to blink and close his eyes. With the helpless attitude of coming, Jian Wushuang continued to lie down like this. Spring and autumn changes, Shua Shui replaces Yang Chun. Is just a few days, and he has counted 500,000 years. The time of 500,000 years has been extremely long, but Jian Wushuang is like a stone, lying for 500,000 years. Since he couldn't get a little bit of power from the outside world, He could only rely on the magical power bred by Dan Tian to repair his broken body inch by inch. It's been like this for 500,000 years. Jian Wushuang was finally able to manipulate his body to make simple movements, but because of one of his wrong actions, he continued to lie down for nearly 100,000 years. Seeing that it was full to the extreme and strong enough to surpass any kind of regular power he saw, the unbelievable sword Wushuang tried to absorb a ray of that vast mysterious energy, and then lay straight in the pit. After the practice of painful lessons, when the completely recovered sword Wushuang climbed up from the pit, he had never done anything like this. For 600,000 years, Jian Wushuang had to sigh in the sky, which was a double torture of his body and soul. Feeling the extreme power of the body, he decided to prepare to find a way to leave here. After all, the divine universe is his route, and many old friends are waiting for him. He tried to tear the space with vast divine power, but the divine power that could resist with the ancestral chamber, when crossing the space, turned out to be difficult to leave even white marks. In desperation, Jian Wushuang had to give up. Walked out of this realm full of wild trees, Jian Wushuang finally realized the strange place. That is, there is no breath of living creatures here. Even the clear voice of flying birds has never appeared. Is this a dead zone? Jian Wushuang thought while leaning over the dome. Just when he just stood up, a big crisis between life and death made him look down at him subconsciously. I saw in the middle of the thick green forest a huge purple tail that swallowed the giant python, whipped towards him. Simply had no time to dodge, and Jian Wushuang was directly pulled from the sky, battered hundreds of towering giant trees with his body. He stopped his body only to feel that his body seemed to be scattered. Boom! The earthquake shook. The towering giant trees were lined up side by side, and the whole body was dark. But the tail was a strange purple monster, and slowly walked out of the darkness. Gives birth to 6 thick canines, which looks like a blood pool under its mouth. The giant claw tears the space, and the swift approach towards the sword without cover. The terrible breath of such extreme erupted, so that he had no desire to fight, and flew across the blow directly. Escaped with a single blow. Jian Wushuang didn't even have time to gasp, and a dark purple tail was drawn, smashing him to the ground again. The strange beast at the speed of its inconsistency, and before the sword has no two sides, open the giant mouth of the blood abyss and swallow it. No longer wanted to save his strength, Jian Wushuang directly used the ancestor technique. The radiance of the heaven gate of the right realm emerged, and one side of the heavenly giant finger emerged from Jian Wushuang, and then stabbed into the mouth of the giant beast. Is in the most outstanding combat power of the divine universe. Under this blow, the corner of the beast's mouth was directly torn, and the 6 hill-like canines directly broke 3. The giant beast retreated, and then went crazy completely, desperately opening his mouth to shovel towards Jian Wushuang. Looking at the guy who can't even die from ancestor surgery, Jian Wushuang dared to die, and fled wildly. Just like this, one person and one animal chased in this giant forest. Jian Wushuang had already made his worst plan, and the giant beast behind him suddenly howled, and then fell to the ground like a mountain collapse. Jian Wushuang looked back and forth with physical and mental turmoil. Only then did he see that the beast was caught by something, and his body twitched. A wailing resounded from the mouth of the giant beast, and his eyes were full of pleading. Is this guy trying to lure me to hook? Jian Wushuang doubted when he was about to turn and leave this place of right and wrong. The beast even uttered words and said intermittently, "Save. Save." Slightly contemplative, Jian Wushuang walked forward cautiously, and when he got closer, he could clearly see that a huge chain was bound under the giant's neck. The chain was deeply embedded between its necks, and under this rush, he almost strangled his entire head. Just in this moment, the beast was so angry that he could not live. Took a deep breath, Jian Wushuang paused in front of this hill-like figure, looked at the chain between the deep bones and flesh. After a little hesitation, he pulled out the Tailuo Excalibur, and the sword broke the chain. The chain shattered, and the giant beast murmured before lying down quietly. Did not intend to stay Jian Wushuang. When he was about to leave, The glare of the corner of his eyes glanced at the ground. I saw in the thick chain a huge iron plate with red tape engraved in his eyes. Waving his hand to lift up the iron card, Jian Wushuang only saw the red text above, which was engraved by human hands and contained the power of regular restraint. The giant behemoth of the spring raised his head and whispered at Jian Wushuang, watching the iron card full of fear and panic. Jian Wushuang didn't care about the beast's behavior, but pondered. The text on the iron plate should be carved by human hands. That is to say, it must not be a dead domain. Then what kind of dome will be here? What will the avenue rules look like? No one can answer. The only living thing that Jian Wushuang has seen in the more than 600,000 years since he came here is the big guy right now. Chapter 46-53. In the gigantic giant forest, a whole body is dark, but the tail is a mysterious monster with a bright purple color, and it traverses it quickly. On the broad back of this giant beast, a young man dressed as a ranger was lying on his back and was sleeping. The extremely soft hair of the giant beast is like mink velvet, which caused Jian Wushuang to sleep on its back ever since he collapsed this big guy. Because of the unique characteristics of the giant beast, Jian Wushuang gave it a nice name Azzy. For more than 10 years, one person and one animal never stopped and ran towards the man-made territory. Original Sword Muzu also wanted to know some news about this side of the sky from Az's mouth. But besides some simple thinking, it is difficult to give back any useful news. Manged Song Lin was quickly thrown behind him, and as he moved forward, the breath of various creatures gradually increased. On Az's gentle and broad back, the drowsy sword Wushuang, I don't know when, and suddenly felt a great crisis inexplicably. He abruptly sat up, and then saw a huge bird that almost covered the sky above the sky dome, and a pair of eyes with green mansions locked the sword Wushuang almost instantaneously. The breath that directly confronted death almost caused Jian Wushuang to slam a violent spirit, and he slapped Aziz's head with a palm. Run Aziz quickly. Give me a fatal run. Aziz's hind paws dig out the ground, and suddenly flew out, just like an arrow from a string, and flew away thousands of miles in a flash. However, the speed of the huge blue bird that covered the sky was even more terrifying. Almost as soon as Azzy accelerated, it had already followed. The Tailuo Excalibur is about to be pulled out by Jian Wushuang, but the sky blue bird directly turned into a slim figure and fell behind Jian Wushuang. A slender hand pressed Jian Wushuang's palm and pressed the Tailuo Excalibur back into the scabbard. Don't look back, run away. Qi Rua's voice sounded in Jian Wushuang's ears, and then there was no more voice. Jian Wushuang froze, looking back subconsciously. A handsome woman with green hair in a green shirt and a skirt hugged him tightly from the back and was dead. Jian Wushuang's gaze looked down. On the chest of the t-shirt, a palm-sized wound was gurgling out of the blood. Barely recovered from the shock, Jian Wushuang hesitated whether to throw this woman of unknown origin, and apparently being chased down. Thinking again and again, Jian Wushuang sighed, but still did not give up. He held the t-shirt girl in front of him with his backhand, with his palms against it, conveying the divine power with physical pain. Unsurprisingly, the t-shirt woman contains the meridian of that energy, and also repels the divine power. But her physical body does not repel the divine power, repairing at a speed visible to the naked eye. At the same time, Jian Wushuang's tight eyes looked into the distance, and a breath that was no longer calm was about to sweep. After smelling the restless breath, Aziz appeared particularly irritable, and the speed of escape also accelerated. However, at the next moment a low murky voice resounded throughout Shino. Miscellaneous people walking in front of you. Don't stop. This seat will blow you all into pieces. Jian Wushuang secretly said badly, and sent the girl in the arms straight forward. Azixin grasped it, and curled her head into her mouth when she crooked her head. After doing all this, Jian Wushuang only held Aziz and stopped at the same place. Nearly 6 bodies with magnificent energy came from all directions. They were uniformly dressed in large black robes with gold patterns on their cuffs. Just a glance, Jian Wushuang's pupils are suddenly tight. These 6 guys who don't seem to have high status, Each of them has the strength of a half-ancestor. The 6 figures surrounded by Jian Wushuang Tuan did not rush to kill, but looked at him with a sense of scrutiny. Which way are you? Why are you walking alone in this barren land? One of the older people stepped forward and asked in a deep voice. Sword Muzu had already made the abdomen draft, pretending to flinch. The boy is a man in the mountains, has no school and no school. He was born in the barbarism and grew up in the barbarity from an early age. The elder looked at Jian Wushuang again and said, "Since you haven't left this place, then this seat asks you, have you ever seen a blue luan?" Jian Wushuang immediately understood that the green luan in his mouth should be the girl in the blue shirt who had just passed out. The boy hasn't seen it before, and if there is news, he will tell several adults. Jian Wushuang was sincerely afraid. Seniors obviously did not want to stay here. But just as he was about to leave, a strong man behind him whispered, "Second brother, we can't make a difference without that blue luan, it's better." Speaking of this, several people looked at Jian Wushuang and Izzy under him. "It's okay if this kid is unlucky, grab them first." The elders ordered that a total of 3 horse-powered trains go straight to the ground. Jian Wushuang's eyes were cold, and he waved directly with one hand, and several vast swords were practiced against the 3 races. Sword power that can be resisted by the ancestral chamber, how can the half-ancestor level compete? The vast swords were easily crushed, and then the 3 of the nearest were directly strangulated. Everything is only instantaneous. When the elder responds, a figure with a cold death breath has already reached behind him. "No, you killed this seat, it's the hole." Before he finished, Jian Wushuang directly waved and cut off his neck. The remaining 2 guys whose legs shook like sifting chaff were also solved by Jian Wushuang. From beginning to end, less than 10 breaths, 6.5 ancestors all died. Just dropped to the ground. Jian Wushuang saw that the woman in the blue shirt hidden by a Z in her mouth, when she was sitting on a Z's head, was looking at him with interest. Looking at her appearance, there is no way to be injured. Seeing Jian Wushuang, the blue shirt woman jumped off a Z's head, raised her eyebrows and smiled. "I don't see it. Your guy's strength is really good." Glanced at her side. Jian Wushuang apparently did not have any good feelings for her, when even flashed away. The girl in the blue shirt looked pale, then hurriedly said, "Hey, I haven't thanked you yet." "Go away, demon," Jian Wushuang said coldly. The girl in the blue shirt suddenly became anxious. "Your kid, dare to call this seat a demon girl? This seat wants you to eat and walk." After the words were finished, several forces of Cui Qing swept out of her sleeves and ran straight to Jian Wushuang. Noisy, he threw his hands directly and blasted out a magic power, smashing that green power instantly. The whole mangling giant forest shook endlessly. Chapter 46-54. After the power of Cui Qing was offset, the t-shirt woman was shocked. "Who are you?" Taking a deep breath, the wing of the blue shirt woman turned into a blue wing and flew to the side of Jian Wushuang. Passing away, Jian Wushuang said concisely, apparently did not want to entangle her. And the t-shirt girl obviously didn't have this kind of consciousness, and directly sat down on a Z's back. Facing Jian Wushuang, the curiosity in her eyes was even more. "Passing by? I have never seen anyone use the energy you used just now. It is really mysterious." If she didn't care about the blue shirt woman, Jian Wushuang looked at her neck, where an iron chain iron plate exactly the same as a Z's neck was tied. Perceived Jian Wushuang's gaze, the t-shirt woman hugged herself quickly. "You are despicable." He was covered with black lines, so he had to be patient and said, "I see that iron card." The girl in the blue shirt smirked, and then grabbed the iron plate between her necks. "You say this is the nameplate used to bind and record the number, all thanks to that bastard." Didn't speak anymore. Jian Wushuang pulled out the Tai Luo Excalibur, directly picked up the iron card, and easily cut the iron chain. The blue shirt woman's eyes widened, and she couldn't believe the iron plate that had been broken into 2 sections. How can this iron plate, even if I can't break it? What you can't do doesn't mean that others can't do it. Well, now you can go, and I'm going to leave. Jian Wushuang said quietly. "My name is Qing Wan." Qing woman nodded her head. Thank you for saving me. You will be reported again in the future. Jian Wushuang waved his hand. Don't say that far. I ask you, do you know if there is any way to leave this universe? It turns out that there are really other universes besides us. The woman named Qing Wan surprised. Sword warrior is full of black lines. Do you have any way to leave? I have stayed here long enough. Qing Wan stopped talking, as if he was making a decision, and finally nodded. It can be, but with my ability, I can only tear a gap at most. Who had no hope for the sword, had nodded suddenly. Enough, enough. Qing Wan nodded. Now, take me to your original place. Has been unable to suppress the excitement of the sword. Wushuang immediately took the blue wand, directing a Z to gallop toward the original place. For nearly 600,000 years, it has been so long in this wild land alone, which is simply unimaginable. Sword Musa desperately wants to return to the divine universe. For 600,000 years, I am afraid it will wipe out most people's memories. All he can do is catch a little chance to return to the divine universe. After more than 10 years, the two came to the original place. Looking at the crater that has become a giant lake, Jian Wushuang sighed with emotion. Who can think of him coming to another unknown universe and lying directly for 600,000 years? Did you first enter from here? Qing Wan asked, while the peculiar green ray of peculiar energy surged from her whole body. Sword Wushuang nodded his head and pointed to a position with great precision. To be honest, I'm afraid you will be the first and the last guy to break into Daanhuan by himself. I can't imagine it. Qing Wan shrugged. In short, good luck. Daanhuan. Sounds weird. Jian Wushuang secretly thought to himself. At the next moment, the blue wand made a long cry, and the whole figure turned into a blue sky bird, ascending to the sky. She suddenly pecked towards the void with the emerald blue bird's beak, and suddenly the void stirred ripples. Then a crack with the size of a sharp tip appeared, and the blue wand struggled to tear it, and then the crack cracked to an inch long. It is now. Qing Wan Changming. Jian Wushuang patted Aziz's head, and then swept across the crack. The violent atmosphere of time and space turbulent again emerged. Jian Wushuang took a deep breath toward Qing Wan Gongdao. Thank you for your help. So we don't know each other. Reverted to a humanoid blue wand smiled lightly. Well, we don't owe each other. If possible, send Azzy to a more brutal place. Don't let it be caught again. Jian Wu added another sentence, and then strode into the chaos of time and space. Wait, Qing Wan suddenly stopped him again. Can we meet again in the future? I'm afraid there is no chance to meet again. Finally looking back at Qing Wan, Jian Wushuang waved his hand, completely disappearing into the chaos of time and space. Looking at the time and space crack that had been closed, Qing Wan Dun was lost in place, and it took a long time to pace away. This ancient and desolate barren land is completely calm again. If it is not for 600,000 years, a young ranger has strayed into this place. I am afraid it will always be silent. Stepped into the chaos of time and space, and the turbulent gang wind that could even split the soul of the soul hit again. Something surprised Jian Wushuang is that although these turbulent gang winds are as horrible as ever, they are not as painful as before. This change made him excited. At least don't worry about the possibility of falling into the chaos of time and space at any time. Watching the faint light behind him disappear, Jian Wushuang flew directly across the turbulence, carefully looking for the breath of the divine universe. In the process of his non-stop searching, a faint and kind atmosphere came from which direction, like coordinates, guiding Jian Wushuang forward. Is also that breath. Jian Wushuang has been revising the route all the time, struggling forward in the chaos of time and space. I do indeed know how many years I have traveled in the turbulence, and the intimate atmosphere is getting stronger and stronger. When Jian Wushuang suddenly crossed a turbulent flow, a figure sitting in time and space appeared in his eyes. Zhou God. Jian Wushuang was completely shocked. Looking at the sitting figure, the brain could no longer think. The eternal God, who sealed the false God in the chaos of time and space with himself, slowly opened his eyes at this moment. It seems that through hundreds of millions of years eternal God smiles. Wushuang Shuang Yu, we meet again. Jian Wushuang's eyes were slightly red, and he rushed directly to Eternal God. In his eyes, the kind-hearted elder has already suffered too much suffering. Little friends get up soon. The old man can't bear your worship. Eternal God bent over and raised Jian Wushuang, smiling. You are already the master of the rules of the world, and the old man can't stand your worship. Being a teacher for one day, being a teacher for life, disciples saluting to the teacher, that is also the rule. Jian Wushuang said, kneeling on one knee and saluting the God of Eternal solemnly. Chapter 46-55. Zhou Shen's eyes were full of relief and distress, and he lifted the sword. Wushuang, you are mature. Eternal God sighed with emotion. I have grown from a young friend who listened to Yunxiao Palace to a real Eternal God. Jian Wushuang smiled bitterly. I have been away for 500,000 years, and I don't know what will happen between the divine power universe. Zhou Shen heard the words and smiled. Don't worry, the rules of the avenue are different. The 500,000 years you have experienced may not be so long in another universe. Everything is too late. He nodded thoughtfully. Everything is too late. Go back. I'm here to show you the way. The divine power universe can no longer be without you. Eternal God smiled, stretched out his thin palm, and pointed in a direction. Jian Wushuang hurriedly said, Teacher, now that I see you in the chaos of time and space, how can you not go back with me? And the universe of divine power cannot be without you. Zhou Shen slowly shook his head. I can't go back anymore. My source has dried up. If not waiting for you here, I would have died. Seems to confirm his words. The figure of Eternal God dimmed at a speed visible to the naked eye, and began to shatter from the soles of his feet, like countless stars scattered. Jian Wushuang was shocked. He hurriedly released his divine power, trying to stabilize the figure of the Eternal God, but it didn't help. The last thing I can do is send you back to the divine power universe. Eternal God smiled and nodded, and at the same time gently pushed Jian Wushuang away. Jian Wushuang's eyes were red, and looking at the Eternal God whose figure had been quietly scattered in the chaos of time and space, he knew that everything was gone. Countless tiny rays of light converge into a galaxy-like current, which extends to the infinite distance. Adjusted the lost mind, Jian Wushuang rushed to the distance. The galactic galaxy transformed into a finally stayed in a vortex, before dissipating completely. Jian Wushuang didn't hesitate, striding directly into the vortex. Innumerable huamong stood up, and turned into thousands of horses to improve themselves. He only felt a burst of inexplicable restraint on his body, and then he realized that it was the rule of heaven and heaven that belonged to the entire divine universe, even if he became an ancestor. The eyes were dim and clear at the moment. In the blue starry sky, a figure dressed in a black ranger stood here. The surging and surging divine power directly supplemented his nearly dry meridian, and the derived divine power of nearly 100 stars was supplied to him. Sword Muses slowly opened his eyes. There were rules of the Tao flowing around him, and the thunderous serpent floated above his head. A full 600,000 years, almost the same as his time in the divine power universe. The sword under the eyes of Wu Mushuang was uneasy. He was worried that everything was wrong. Stayed in place for a long time before Jian Wushuang decided to face it. Traveled in this cold star field with almost no trace. And soon Jian Wushuang felt something was wrong. Nearly 10,000 star kingdoms, the kingdom of God, actually does not have the breath of half-divided creatures. You have to know that even in the far north of the universe, the star territory has footsteps. But this starry field full of power and without any turbulence, how could there be no human sect? Did he change the world over the years? In doubt, Jian Wushuang ran deep under the stars. He had to rush to the battlefield outside the territory to see those old friends and unfinished things. Finally, after crossing the hundreds of millions of stars, Jian Wushuang felt the realm of Starry Kingdom. He is near and to a relatively prosperous vast star field, which is full of divine power and good luck, and is very suitable for practicing meditation. Xian walked through the giant mountain. Jian Wushuang directly came to the largest sect in this kingdom of star kingdoms, the real sword palm. Has some origins. In the Battle of the Catastrophe, the true ancestor of the sword sent all 7 supremes of the whole sect, and the elders in charge of the commanding elders were half-step invincible supreme. Jian Wushuang went directly to the palm of the true sect of the sword, but what made him a little strange was that in the first great sect of this kingdom, nearly 100,000 disciples did not see an ultimate dominance. "Who is here? What's the matter?" A red-haired toothed boy with a red tooth walked out of the mountain gate, looking at Jian Wushuang curiously. "I am a disciple of the Shrine of Life, and you are the old friends, and I am here to ask some questions." Jian Wushuang arched karate. There was a glimmer of sadness in the eyes of the boy holding the sword. Then he looked up and said, "Please come back to that, senior. My head of the family has died in the battlefield outside the battlefield 200 years ago. The 6 elders also died together." Jian Wushuang, stunned, sighed inwardly and finally said, "I see that your sect has almost no disciples of ultimate domination. Why?" The boy holding the sword again said, "The new eternal God has arrived, and the universe has been summoned. Any monk who ultimately dominates the realm can go to the Kangwatai Futon to hear it. There are only more than 100 brothers in the realm who have dominated the realm," said. Hearing this, he was startled again, and soon understood that during his disappearance, Qi Ting became the master and became the new eternal God. In this regard, Jian Wushuang does not have any objections. After all, the divine power universe cannot be without a day. Cheating is also a generous, kind generation, and has a male style, which is far more suitable for him to be eternal God. At the same time, the wide opening of the Kangwatai Futon listener was indeed a great act after the catastrophe. In addition, I would like to ask Xiaoyu one thing. How many years have passed since the last battle of the catastrophe? He asked, feeling a little uneasy. 213 years, less than 200 years. After holding the sword boy for a moment, he said. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile. In this way, then you won't be disturbed by the door. The sword boy shook his head and smiled, stepped back and took 2 steps. He stopped, and then turned to face the entire Palm sect, swaying a layer of vast divine halo. The boy holding the sword only feels warm all over the body, and the layers of realm in the back of the body are broken open, just like the mushrooms springing up, and the magical power is climbing crazy. A red halo column rose up, fainting the space of dozens of the whole body. Everything was shrouded in dim divine power. The red-skinned white sword boy with the sword turned his body off and went straight into the supreme divine realm. Pun! He fell down on the ground, and then stood up and looked at the distance. In the misty clouds, there are still traces of those who have come. On the starry sky, Jian Wushuang looked back at Jinzong, and then smiled helplessly. Already an ancestor. Under the vast vault, he slept for 600,000 years, and returned to the divine universe to achieve the ancestor level. This is really lying down to become an ancestor. Only 200 years have passed, and everything is still too late. Chapter 46-56. The clouds are so smoky, the divine power is vast. Kangwu Taichung, located above Ludu, only one vast flesh-colored furnace tripod remains. Behind the furnace, there are hundreds of thousands of lotus peaks. The most central part of the lotus peak, the cheating is as gentle and soft as 200 years ago, is nothing but the surging divine power, but another unknown power and breath. The whole person looks even more unfathomable. In this huge Kangwatai giant hall, the furnace is full of agility and vigorous vitality. Gathered for the second time, almost condensed the fire in the entire divine universe. A total of more than 5 million monks, all invested in that strange flesh-colored furnace tripod. The clouds of smoke rising from the sky are all the faces of every monk. So far in 200 years, a total of nearly 10 million monks, the body disappeared in the flesh-colored furnace tripod. Looking at the misty cloud rising from the furnace, Qi Ting's mouth appeared a smile. The furnace was slowly changing, but in an instant, it became a glorious white body. On the head of the body, a strange face that did not distinguish between men and women slowly grew out. Qi Ting beckoned, flesh came to him in front of him. Slowly stood up, Qi Ting walked around the flesh and admired. Then his fingers cut the flesh's abdomen. Inhong, full of blood of vast divine power, appeared together. The eccentric body transcended the half-ancestor level, and the breath that was only one step away from the ancestor level was undoubtedly revealed. It's only the last step, the last step. Your heart is there. Waving his hands together to close the empty abdomen, Qi Ting put a long tuxedo on the weird body. At first glance, it is similar to cheating. At the same time, the main entrance of the Kangwatai giant hall slowly opened, and a little haggard Qi walked towards the hall, looked up at Qi Ting and the eccentric flesh, and Qi Ting lowered his head deeply. How come, haven't they come alone? Qi Ting said in a deep voice, unable to hide his anger in his eyes. Qi shook his head. I haven't received any sectarian receipts so far, I'm afraid. Cheating did not speak anymore, but closed his eyes and meditated in situ. After a moment, he said quietly, I released the news and said that I already knew the news about Jianwushuang, and at the same time told them that Luidus Chaos Spring I fluctuated abnormally. Qi listened, and then stopped talking. What happened? Taking a deep breath, Qi listened and said, in recent years, there have been some bad comments from the Temple of Taishu, saying that your elder brother you used the futon to listen to the Tao, and lure countless monks to death to practice your evil. Qi Ting was expressionless, and then said, 200 years ago, it is also time for me to go out and move around. Your second brother continued to do as I said. I personally went to the Temple of Taishu and retrieved one thing. Qi listened and nodded, then quickly ran out of the giant hall. After a moment, Qi Ting and the strange flesh behind him also disappeared. What? There is news of sword warriors. In the Qishao star field, Feng Qi suddenly jumped from the flame throne, and Feng Mu stared at the Qilin tribe. You are telling the truth? The Qilin tribe came to make his face pale, without any hesitation, Eternal God said. And at the same time, Luidus' chaotic spring eyes also had a volatile atmosphere. Asked me carefully again, and Feng Qi even had to rush to Kangwatai. Old ancestor. Feng Xiao stopped talking. Aren't you worried that this news is fake? Feng Qi was startled, and then said quietly, if he dares to deceive this seat, even if this seat is dead, we must scrape him alive. Watching Feng Qi walk out of the Qishao hall first, Feng Xiao gritted his teeth, and directly led more than 1,000 supreme followers to the Kangwu Terrace. At the same time, the Dragon Clan, who had kept the Tianmen closed, was also led by Long Yen and Long Qi to Kangwatai. In the dim hall, the sunlight enters all year round without shining. In a place where he could barely see the beam, he sat quietly in a black Jinhua costume. Behind this figure stood nearly 100 figures again. I told you to leave, why didn't you still leave? Slowly opened his eyes, the Emperor Taishu calmly said. An old man on crutches slowly took a step and arched his hand. Go back to His Royal Highness. All the disciples of Taishu Temple should walk. He is dead, and the remaining old guys will accompany His Royal Highness finally go for a ride. In that case, then let's take the last journey together. Taishu Divine Emperor slowly stood up and looked at the figures. But before that, you will help me do the last thing again, and warn the two families, and the Temple of Life, never go to Kangwatai. Promise. The old man with the stick bowed his hand and promised, and then scattered nearly 100 figures in the temple with the sky. Looking at the already empty hall, Taishu Divine Emperor also stepped away, and stood outside the Taishu Temple. 7 days in a row, until the sky was low and the giant face of the vicissitudes of the avenue came. The Emperor Taishu slowly opened his eyes, the clouds collapsed, and the stars and moon shattered. As if the heavenly path came, his figure emerged from under the giant face. Supreme divine power is intertwined with the rules of the avenue. At the moment he appeared, Taishu Divine Emperor realized that he could not move at all. Qi Ting is here. The undisguised ancestral atmosphere can almost wipe out one aspect. And behind him is a quirky figure. Looking at this already existent existence, Taishu God Emperor's face is still very calm. If you do that, you are not afraid that Jianwushuang will return in the future. Are you looking for the bill? Qi Ting walked slowly towards him. The shadowy color grew from the bottom of his eyes. Sword Muzu? What is he? I am the savior of the entire divine universe. Not only do you not thank me, but hide from me? Taishu Divine Emperor sneered. Savior? Don't you think these 3 words come out of your mouth? Is it shameless? Cheating was not irritated, but just said coldly, say what you want to say. I will take you on my way later. Do you know what the last thing I regret? Is that you can't let Jian Wushuang kill you on the battlefield outside the territory in the last battle. Emperor Taishu calmly said. All of them didn't realize it. Only I see clearly that although you are a person of the divine universe, the energy doped in the divine power you use is exactly the same as the emperor of the virtual universe. Cheating heard the words and smiled lowly. It's clever, but everything is too late. After the words were finished, Qi Ting extended his palm and held it in one hand, and the power of Dideo rules directly crushed the heart of Taishu Divine Emperor. Chapter 46-57. The chest is sunken, and even the origin with the invincible supreme is broken in an instant. Broken source means irreversible demise. The mouth of Taishu God Emperor's mouth gushed with a blood of divine blood, and his face appeared a touch of blood red. You will regret everything you have done, and then you will have no chance of atonement. He said slowly, for this guy who is invincible and supreme, but has no fear of him from beginning to end, Qi Ting is disgusted, and at the same time feels a little palpitations. Just as he was about to refine it directly, a sharp and unmatched spear, like a lightning bolt, stabbed directly into the grotesque flesh. Countless sharp blame called resounding, majestic blood spewed out. Taishu Divine Emperor's always tense face finally laughed out loud, and the long spear that accompanied him in the chaos of the ancient chaos finally failed to let his master suffer. Cheating could no longer keep calm, and directly shattered Taishu Divine Emperor into powder, and then deplored the incomparable use of supernatural powers to block the crack in the chest of the flesh. Damn it all, let me die! Qi Ting was furious, and waved his hand directly to suppress it, and the entire plane of the star field suddenly vanished into powder. A generation of invincible supremacy, Taishu Divine Emperor fell. Participated in several wars of catastrophe. He did not die on the battlefield outside the territory, and eventually died in the hands of the new eternal god. The star field collapsed, continuing the planes of the countless chaos era, and finally completely dissipated. Kiting's figure disappeared, and he couldn't wait to rush to Kangwatai, where he must have gathered hundreds of thousands of supremes, and the existence of several half-ancestors. After hearing the news that Jian Wushuang might return from the Eye of Chaos Spring, nearly 100,000 priests have come here from the star universe of the Divine Power Universe for several years. Led by the 2 dragons and phoenixes, the supreme strongmen who participated in the last Holocaust battle, without any absence, all gathered in front of Kangwatai. The face of each of them is no longer the silence that first entered the foreign battlefield, but excitement and expectation. But in just 200 or 300 years, many traumas suffered by the Supreme have not even recovered, but they all came. Nothing else, just to hear some news about that person. 2 half-ancestors of Fengqi and Dragon clan stood at the forefront of the army, standing far in front of Kangwatai. No one was near. You said, did he have any news of Jian Wushuang? Fengqi asked frowningly at Long Yen. Long Yen thought for a moment, then shook his head. I'm not sure, but in terms of the rumor he has spread for hundreds of years, the credibility is not high. Why do you still come? Fengqi wondered. There is always a gamble, and I have a hunch that the unparalleled adult is about to return. Long Yen said. Fengqi pouted. So what do you think about the Shrine of Life? Nobody came? Long Yen said. They have their concerns, maybe they will arrive soon. As they spoke, the gate of the Kangwatai Giant Hall opened. The huge treasure that stretched for thousands of miles in cheating gradually floated in the void, and the ancestor-level dignity was revealed. Even the Supreme has a strong feeling of worship. You are here. Huge Treasure Face said, generous and kind. At this moment, even Fengqi, who was extremely repulsive to Qi Ting, could not pick out any faults of him. I have got some information about the master of the Wushuang Palace of Life Shrine. and I would like to move to Kangwu Taichung to find out. Qi Ting said, reaching out. Feng Qi and Long Yan and Long Qi looked at each other, and then said loudly, Eternal God is on. It is not necessary to harass Kangwu Taichung. We are all in a hurry, and please ask Eternal God to explain the news about Jian Wushuang. Let us have a mental preparation. With this remark, more than 100,000 Supreme Masters echoed in unison. Obviously there was no one person's intention to enter Kangwatai. Qi Ting's huge treasure still looks peaceful. I'm not too clear about when Wushuang Palace Master will return, but in recent days, I have felt under the eyes of that chaotic spring the breath of the Lord overflows. All I assert that in the future, the return of Wushuang Palace Master must come from the eyes of Chaos Spring. But even me, it is difficult to break the imprisonment above the eyes of Chaos Spring, so I want to combine the powers of you today, and break the imprisonment together. Waiting for the return of Wushuang Gongzhu. Hundreds of thousands of Supreme Masters were shaken at this moment. Only Feng Qi, who had participated in that battle, frowned. As the pole of the divine universe, if Jin Wushuang returns, there is indeed a great possibility that it appears from the eyes of Chaos Spring. However, that layer of imprisonment was the seal of the old deity, and even cheating couldn't figure it out. Can it be opened by the strength of more than 100,000 Supremes? She always felt that Qi Ting's purpose was by no means so simple, but she could not refute it for a while. Try it, otherwise it would be meaningless for us to gather here. Long Yan whispered. Feng Qi didn't say much. After looking around, he walked into the giant hall of Kangwatai immediately. Watching the influx of hundreds of thousands of high-level supreme supremacy, Qi Ting's huge treasure is still in peace, but his godless eyes are full of greed. The more you come the better, so my mud tires can fade into. Feel the warm and divine power of the jade brick under his feet. Be careful, I was sent by the Emperor Taishi Temple before, and said that the monks who came to the Kangwatai Auditorium returned without a trace and disappeared. Long Yan was on her side, using only a secret message heard by a talent. Feng Qi responded, I heard it a long time ago. Instead of asking him to come to the door, I'll take a look at what medicine he sells in the gourd. In short, be careful. The whereabouts of Wushuang Palace Master is unknown. No one from Life Shrine comes. We have to be careful. Long Yan said in a deep voice. Qi Ting, who had been condensed, walked in the forefront, guiding everyone forward. The more the march, the more quaint and bright walls around it will be broken, until the giant hall begins to disappear suddenly, was replaced by a shattered star field. At the very center of the broken star field, a dark blue Huameng chaotic spring eye emerged from one side, and the ripples undulated like a lake. Here is the ruins of Luodu Xingyu, that the Qilan tribe previously controlled. Qi Ting walked forward, and then stood above the eyes of Chaos Spring, and Wanji Jiang divine power flashed around him. Chapter 4658. The Cheating, which is a body of thousands of invisible avenues, stands high above the ground, condensing on top of the eye of the chaotic spring, and it is actually a bit of a strange breath. The turbulent energy in the form of a sky river swept the entire broken star field. In the meantime, all the Supremes felt a trembling. Seeing that the seal of Chaos Spring Eye was opened, Feng Qi, who had planned to stop, was shocked that he could not manipulate the divine power in his body. Long Yan and Long Qi also changed their complexion. They also felt the endless black abyss in the eyes of Chaos Spring, and wanted to drag them all in. Feng Qi suddenly looked at the broken sky dome, only to see behind that cheating. I don't know when there was an extra weird figure. The facial features were very pale, as if they hadn't grown. All the supreme minds are sinking fiercely, and the magical powers in their respective bodies are poured out uncontrollably, sucking nearly 150,000 high-level supreme divine power. The strange body behind cheating is growing facial features, hair, meridians, and viscera at a rate visible to the naked eye. The seemingly generous and kind cheating also showed its ugly face at this moment, and the een and madness sulked them. It's a great honor for you to be able to integrate with my mud tire. Why do you need to resist again? Qi Ting said intoxicatedly. Feng Qi directly furiously said. You the dogs, miscellaneous dogs, you alone kill the monk, even more than the entire virtual universe to kill. You should be stern. Qi Ting smiled strangely and slowly leaned down. I said, that is your honor and your destiny. Only by making some contributions to me will I send out compassion, to show you a more profound Austrian realm. At that time, you will find out how sad it is that you have made your own way. Every supreme body is declining rapidly, and their respective realms are beginning to decline. Even Feng Qi of the half-ancestor level also felt that the state was going backwards. She tried to get rid of that terrifying power, but found that it didn't help, and she couldn't even mobilize the divine power. Long Yin and Long Qi are also the same, looking at the sky doomed desperately. As he sucked his divine power, the wacky flesh behind cheating continued to fill. The facial features gradually straightened. The black hair had already crossed his shoulders, and countless fine meridians began to meander from under the skin. At the same time, the ancestor-level avenue began to fall. That too vast divine power, like a giant sea of abyss, makes people's palpitating energy emerge from the pores of the flesh. All supremes are witnessed by their own eyes, the birth of a strong ancestor. Everything is incredible. How can two cosmic lux who support at most one ancestor class be born? At the next moment, the entire Kangwatai Great Hall, together with the star field, could not bear the advent of the two ancestors, and it was directly broken. The weird flesh fully possessed the wisdom at the moment of becoming the ancestor. The predatory cosmic luck and infinite power were sucked into the mouth by his whale, and his face, which was exactly the same as Qi Ting, shone with greed. Looking at the fully formed clay tire, Qi Ting nodded in satisfaction and excitedly said, Now, use your body as your last contribution. By the end of his speech, countless strands of the power to the sun emerged from his palm, showing the power of covering the sky, and the heavy cover came. Feng Qi, already weakened to fall to the supreme divine realm, has no backhand, and can only watch himself die. However, at the next moment, a more vast and mysterious divine power came steeply from the sweep, like a cold wind, directly shattered the dense net-like power of the sun. Qi Ting suddenly turned his head, and looked viciously at the place where the offensive was launched. Under this look, the pupils were condensed. I saw that in the completely broken void, a total of more than 50,000 supreme sovereigns broke through the mist and shook the sky. At the forefront of this majestic army, representatives of the Blood Shrine Supreme, the King of Nine Tribulation, and the Great Axe Supreme were dispatched. At the same time, in front of them, two figures completely enveloped by large black robes gave cheating invisible pressure. Lao Cheating, you should know that even if you are an ancestor, there is only one life. The sound of the magnificent instrument carrying the 9-day punishment resounded, and the mysterious figure in the front slowly pulled down the hood on his head, revealing a firm and pure face, and the luxuriant gold patterns floating in the hair. Let he was like a majestic deity, who could not look straight. Sword Muzu, how could it be you? Qi Ting shouted silently. At this moment, all the hundreds of thousands of supremes who were trapped and fell into huge despair were all ecstatic. Even though it has disappeared for nearly 300 years, the appearance of Jian Wushuang is still like taking a pill for everyone. If it weren't for me, are you going to slaughter the divine power universe next? Jian Wushuang took the previous step, and the almost crushing divine power swept up like Tianhe. Ancestral breath. Feng's eyes widened, and he looked at Jian Wushuang in disbelief. Has only disappeared for 300 years. How could he become an ancestor in such a short period of time? Kiting's face was somber to the extreme. His sleeve robe flicked suddenly, only to counteract the influence brought by Jian Wushuang. At the same time, he has borne the idea of retreating about the fierceness of Jian Wushuang. Qi Ting was clearly seen in the last battle. He could kill the false god with half-ancestral strength. Terror exists. Now that he is already an ancestor, I am afraid that his strength has long been beyond the constraints of the rules of the universe. Thinking of this, Qi Ting directly pushed the mud tires and tried to escape. OM! A wave of black water ripples spread from heaven and earth, and under the wide black robe, the face of Lao Zun appeared. Kiting's figure paused for a moment. Sword Wushuang's eyebrows were tightened, and the Tai Luo Excalibur was cut straight down in his hand. The unmatched sword Mango that is about to split the sky and earth will cut the sword directly into Qiting. Under desperation, Qi Ting had to grind his teeth to match the sword. Jian Mushuang, now you leave now, I don't blame it. If you are obsessed and unconscious, there is only one way to die. Slammed out with the palm, and the infinite power of the sun offset Jianmong, he said cruelly. Jian Mushuang smiled coldly. Now that you are destroying your origin, I can save you from the crime of kiln annihilation. Sword Muzu, do you really think you are my opponent? Chapter 46-59. Qiting was horrified. At this moment, he almost gave up all his thoughts and stretched out his arms to block the mud tires. Pooh! The sound of the knife body entering into the flesh sounded, and under the blade of the Tai Luo Excalibur, which could be cut off even by the rules of the road, Qi Ting's entire arm was cut off by the roots, and the blood of the with ancestral breath was spilled into the void. Eating with pain and sigh, Qi Ting summoned a huge Qi Lin Baoxiang to force Jian Wushuang to retreat. Was shocked, and the severed left arm was born again, and Qiting looked at him with hatred in his eyes. Oh, since you are dying for death, then this seat will send you into reincarnation today. At the next moment, the cover of the sky and the Qilin treasure were transformed into a stream of fire stars. Qi Ting stood on the spot, absorbing the magical power of the Kirin treasure, and at the same time, the countless meteor stars wrapped him in it like a rain curtain. Every tiny meteor turned into a scale and dotted on Kiting's body, melting stone into armor, turning flame into robe. Avenue is fully blessed, just like the first ancestor of Qilin King shocked. Raised his hand and cast it in his feet, and the power of the sun would burn the void out of the deep marks of the road. Qi Ting was wrapped in flowing fire, and a group of fire-like flames condensed in his hand, slamming into Jian Wushuang. His gaze was fixed, and he was not afraid of it. He lifted the tarot sword in his hand and stepped forward, a pale cyan invisible barrier surging from Jian Wushuang's whole body. The two collided, bursting out a dazzling horror of firepower. Like a huge fire rain, all the Supremes of Life Shrine are performing magical powers, sheltering the 150,000 Supremes who have been weakened to a certain extent. Thanks for the timely assistance of the Shrine of Life, or I'm afraid it will all be folded here today. Looking at Xuebwa Supreme and others, Feng Qi felt terrified. Blood Wave Supreme nodded with a smile. Thank you. Also thank Wushuang Gongzhu. If it was not for him to decide to set off immediately, I am afraid that it will take us several decades to get the news. I don't know if it was the injury or other reasons. Feng Qi faced a blush, and then whispered in a voice that only one person can hear. He and I have to thank him separately. Above the broken void, the three ancestral ancestors engaged in battle, and even the farther stars were torn apart. Sword Wushuang used one pair of two, but he didn't fall down at all. Every time he made a sword, he could plow down a deep gully on the flame-melting armor of Qi Ting's body. And the mud tire that looks exactly like Qi Ting looks like a ghost. Every time he shoots, he carries countless sorrows and howls, which sounds strange and incomparable. Light and dark gradually began to surround the sword Wushuang wrapped. A type of power world gate floats above the void, and the magnificent divine power shines on the world. This is the first ancestral technique to be performed since Jian Wushuang became an ancestor. A fingertip shines through the sky and covers the ground, far exceeded all previous sentimentary blows, causing Qi Ting's gaze to suddenly abruptly, almost subconsciously retreating rapidly. However, the mud tire did not react at all, but raised his palm in preparation for the blow. No! Seeing back quickly, Qi Ting was almost crazy and rushed back. Regardless of the fact that the finger of the sky had come, he directly reached out and pushed the mud tire out. Boom! One finger is shining, and even the void is easily destroyed in it. The Qi Ting roared as a giant unicorn. Two arms directly hugged the fingertips and carried out a crazy wrestling. All monks are watching this shocking scene of ancestral duel. Above the broken void, It seems that 10,000 rounds of the sun have risen, and the extreme day has swallowed and covered together. Under this extreme daylight, even the strongest ancestors cannot look directly. Time seems to be stagnant, and the pole is only forever. In that bright day, the tarot Excalibur slowly sheathed. The sword Wuxia stood in the same place, and his face was not waved, as if everything that happened next was within his expectation. The extreme daytime caused by the explosion exploded, and the void was broken even worse. In the most broken center, sat on his knees with a miserable figure. The power of the sun has dispersed, and the original huge body, like a demon, has now returned to its original state. The flame armor is also broken, and the ancestral body also hurt the origin during the blocking process. God's blood flows from every pore of cheating, just like a blood man. Sword Musa slowly came to him, not worrying that he would attack. There was a big mouthful of blood in the mouth, and Qi Ting's pupil with the indestructible source was staring at Jian Wuxia. I really did not expect it, and it was only in less than 300 years that you grew to such a terrible state. Even if I slough out of a mud tire, I'm not even as good as you? Jian Wuxia's eyes sank like water, suppressing the anger. You have been promoted to the ancestor level, and you are the eternal god of the entire divine power universe. Why do you have to brutally kill nearly 10 million monks? Qi Ting chuckled. It's just a group of ants. Let them melt into me, is a kind of sublimation to them. Jian Wuxia, your growth is far beyond my imagination. As long as you let me go, I will tell you a big secret. Are you willing to waste the endless years and guard here? Qi Ting struggled to think to get up. His eyes are full of desire to live. Jian Wuxia no longer spoke, but pointed a finger at him remotely. In an instant, the rules of the avenue were broken, and the divine power was forcibly drawn from the body of cheating. The luck belonging to the ancestors was returned to the universe at this moment, and the pure ancestral source that contained the enlightenment of countless roads was also removed by Jian Wuxia. Qi Ting's rickety rise, the rare clearness in the originally mad eyes. Sword Wuxia, if one day you want to find the realm of emptiness, you will certainly repeat my mistakes. By then, I am looking forward to seeing your choice. After saying this sentence, Qi Ting's body shattered, turned into countless ancient stars, and scattered in 9 days in 10 places. Has been in the position of the eternal god for 300 years, and seduced the cheating of the nearly 10 million monks of the divine power universe. The bad results created by cheating are even worse than the virtual universe. The last fire of nearly 10 million divine universes was all lured by them. The divine universe has already reached the edge of collapse and barrenness. Even if cheating was killed, it would be difficult to counteract the evils he created. Sword Musa is hard to understand. How could the Qitong, who was originally easygoing and generous, become this kind of look? At this moment, the cheating mud tire, who was also hit by the extreme day, and was seriously injured, slowly got up, and took a deep look at Jian Wuxia before turning into a black light, which was scattered directly in the stars. Because its speed is too fast, when no one has responded, it has completely disappeared. Chapter 4660. With everything in cheating, even more strange and cunning mud tires so disappeared. Jian Wuxia was surprised, but when he wanted to find it, he found that there was no way to find it. After all, the divine universe is really too vast. Even if it is a star kingdom, it is only a drop of tight song in the universe. The disappearance of the mud tire seems to be a hidden danger, deeply rooted in Jian Wuxia's heart. It's just that all the Supremes don't care about this. What they care about is just the return of Jian Wuxia. From the moment when Qi Ting ascended to the position of the eternal god, he participated in the battle of the catastrophe and survived all the supremacy. In their minds, only one person is qualified to go to the position of eternal god. A total of 200,000 supreme people, at this moment like the tide, enveloping Jian Wuxia in the form of stars. Seeing that the realm and the divine power have dried up to a certain level, Jian Wuxia smiled slightly and waved his hand down to lower his luck. But in an instant, They all returned to the peak of the realm, feeling the tremendous power in the body. All the supremes are spontaneously kneeling on the ground, arching their hands in unison. Thank you, Wushuang Palace Master. Feng Qi then looked at Jian Mushuang and smiled. They all call you Wushuang Gongzhu, but I don't want to. You might as well call you. How about Lord Eternal God? Jian Mushuang was stunned, and then waved his hand hurriedly. Don't joke, I'm definitely not competent. The rest of the people are also enlightened, and the Blood Wave Supreme immediately arches the hand. Unparalleled Palace Master. The Divine Power Universe cannot be unattended for one day. Now the Divine Power Universe is not completely settled. It is time when someone needs to lead. Competent. Long Yin and Long Qi also shared their hands. Dragon Clan Second. Please Imperial Palace Master, ascend to the position of Eternal God. Jian Wushuang didn't speak, but when he looked at the already broken barren star fields, and at the monks who had been running, he slowly raised his mouth and said the simplest word. It is good. The world is clear, a sign of auspiciousness. In the same year, the main sword of the Life Palace, Muzu, came to the position of Eternal God. Putian Tongqing. The whole grand event is expected to last 100 years from the beginning. The most pure divine power turned into a bird congratulation, flying to every corner of the divine universe. In the mortal world, the old man prolonged his life for 20 years. Since then, the weather has been smooth for hundreds of years, and each of the star kingdoms is 10 times as powerful. The Guzong faction who received He Zhao gladly sent his disciples trapped in the realm, even some hidden sects who had never come out. A total of nearly 2 decades, or the sword, or the boat to go to the imperial court, a tens of millions of monks' migration, all gathered in one place, came to the most central place of the entire divine power universe, Yunxiao Palace. Every monk who came here was shocked by the scene in front of him. Above the broken former site of Yunxiao Palace, a magnificent Yunxiao Palace rose again. The 200 ancient primitive pillars lined up on both sides of the square are entrenched with 100 real dragons that are all supreme gods. On the sky again, hundreds of flaming phoenixes mingled, and their rings soared. Their extremely magnificent tail feathers swayed away, no longer a deadly flame, but a beautiful tassel, lined up on the vast square at the same time. Any one of them is the supreme powerhouse of the mighty giant engine. Every monk is in a double open state, and everything he sees is impacting their cognition. At the moment, in front of the square in front of Yunxiao Palace, there stood nearly 200,000 supreme people, and everyone's face was hung with a sincere smile. They all participated in the battle of the catastrophe, and fought side by side with that one. From the sea of corpses, there has never been a moment of retreat. There are more than 5 million monks who participated in the battle of the catastrophe, and only less than 200,000 are left. The cruelty is the most ever. They fought against foreign enemies together, and they will also witness the true presence of Eternal God. Adult Healing also put on a beautiful new dress. His face full of joy stood by the side of the morning clock. Only to be clear, he would ring the morning clock. Blood Wave Supreme, 9 Tribulation King, Giant Axe and others all put on a new suit, and they were all waiting for the moment to come. And Lao Zun is still a black robe. He has always been cold and has a sense of peace. Nearly tens of millions of monks from various universes have gathered in the middle of this vast square. But no one dared to make a loud noise, because on both sides of them, the legendary Supreme True Dragon, on top of their head, is a giant phoenix named after the True Dragon, and in front of them, it is a 200,000 thrilling Supreme. Their proudly talented realm has no face here. At the beginning of the day when the turbid air was clear, Lord Helling, who had been waiting for a long time, vigorously rang his ears and sounded the morning bell. Fairy sounds are vast, and spread to 9 days and 10 places. At this moment, all the monks stared at the Yunxiao Palace, which was located in the clouds of smoke. The door of the temple slowly opened to both sides, and the cloud of smoke formed by the condensed power rose up. A young man dressed in a plain white shirt and hanging jade and green lotus waist pacing out. In his whole body, the Rainbow Avenue crossed the heavens and the earth, and Baoguang circulated. As he moved step by step, thousands of colorful lotus blossomed, heavy shivering surging in his hair. He is like a regular incarnation, raising his hand and throwing it in the foot. And behind him, a young child with 2 buns and red lips and white teeth followed the childishly. Lan Lan, who was in parallel with Xuebua Jizuan and others, smiled heartily when she saw this scene, but her eyes turned red. She seemed to see another continuation in the childish body. At this moment, all the Supremes could hardly conceal their excitement, and all knelt down on the ground, uttering their voices. Divine Power Universe people see eternal God. Because of the unconscious infection of the atmosphere, nearly 10 million monks gathered here, all kneeling on the ground, and said in a voice, "The gods of the universe, see the eternal God." Looking at nearly 10 million monks in that square, all the firepower of the divine universe, Jian Wushuang smiled heartily, and has never been so comfortable. He waved his hand, and the breeze that turned into an avenue lifted all the monks. You don't have to be restrained, although I am the eternal God. The more important identity is also a member of the divine universe. I rise in the end of the micro, and naturally will give back to the end of the micro. In just over 1,000,000 years, I have witnessed the rise and fall of the divine universe. What shocked me most was not the terrible universe, but every monk who participated in the war of Holocaust without turning back. Rescue from time and time again. Is just a dead creature. There is no chance of resurrection. After doing all this, Jian Wushuang summoned Feng Qi, who refused to walk in Laoshao Palace. What's wrong, Lord Eternal God? You are finally willing to summon us. Feng Qi, who was wearing a Su shirt and Luo shirt, walked with the Luyan section, teasing Jian Wushuang. Sword Muzu reluctantly smiled, and then removed the bunch of Qinglian that had been worn for tens of thousands of years from the waist, and handed it to Feng Qi. This green lotus is a transformation of the spirit of the predecessor of the Palace of Life, the Supreme Master Yan Yan. I have been enlightened by me for tens of thousands of years, and I have already borne spiritual wisdom. Now I invite you to send this green lotus to the world. Subject him to temper. Feng Qi nodded. I sent him to a good person? Jian Wushuang shook his head and smiled. You threw that green lotus in the air, and wherever its aura finally spread, which household you cast him on is his character, and the foundation of his future practice of Dao Yuan. Feng Qi nodded again, and then smiled. You really look more and more like eternal God. Jian Wushuang heard the words and smiled helplessly. Feng Qi held the green lotus, and whispered to him when he was about to rush to the world. Sleep for a while. Everything is still with us. He stunned slightly, and then relaxed. Yeah, it's time to sleep for a long time. It hasn't closed my eyes for tens of thousands of years. Under the guidance of childishness, Jian Wushuang slowly walked into the Yunshao Palace. Before going to sleep, Jian Wushuang also invited the Bloodwave Supreme, and other people who did not retreat. Let him open the ancient road of the starry sky, and the path of the heavenly gate with stricter rules, to start the overhaul dispute. From now on, Jian Wushuang slept for millions of years. In these 1,000,000 years, due to the countless luck of his fortune, the rising stars, the amazing geniuses who are not born are all born in heaven. Hundreds of millions of new and old monks are jointly impacting the mysterious path of the heavenly path. Millions of years later, the ancient Shinkong Road was closed slowly, and there were 100 others who came to Yunshao Palace with longing and excitement. Can get the opportunity to come to Yunshao Palace, which is already a great blessing for them. If they get the qualification of hearing from the eternal God Fudu, then the future path of monasticism will definitely reach the top. Lan Lan and the Overlord, who is already the Patriarch, jointly control the ancient Shinkong Road, and lead these monks who pass the examination. Naturally they are also, for this frosty blue messenger. Even these arrogants dare not talk much, but for the careless Overlord, they seem much more active. One of the swordsmen looked like Tianjiao, and whispered, Big brother, the legendary eternal God Master really fought alongside you. Wouldn't it be fooling us? Is planning to smile, and Lan Lan Mei stared at him. Then he quickly covered his mouth. Damn boys, do you know what this place is? Please say one more sentence, and I will throw you out first. For a time, the vast Yunxiao palace in the top of the cloud calmed down again. Next came into their eyes, like a cloud-like supreme, the supreme men who participated in the battle of the catastrophe millions of years ago, have all stayed in the Yunxiao palace, and sat down to realize the Tao. Chapter 4662. More than 100 Jinghong Tianjiao screened from the ancient Xingkong Road have been left in the Yunxiao Palace, and have become one of Tianjiao Supreme after tens of thousands of years. The futon of the eternal God heard that they did not wait, because from the mouth of the red-haired white child, I learned that eternal God was still asleep, and I wondered when to wake up. But their goal is no longer the qualification of the futon to hear, but the more desirable seat of disciples. Established by eternal God, the more demanding path of heaven is the only way to obtain the seat of eternal God disciple. On the way to the gate of that day, we can see the existence of the true peak of the divine universe. Legends, on the way to that gate, the true shadow beyond the invincible supremacy remains. Even if you step into it and practice, it is also supreme. Countless monks yearning for it want to stand out from the starry sky ancient road and step into the path of heaven. Natural competition is far more intense than the starry sky ancient road. Everything is new. Yunxiao Palace Tianyantai, straight into the top of the cloud, the exquisite dojo, the old venerable Bloodwave Supreme, 9 Robbery King, Fengqi, Long Yin Longqi and others all gathered to sit and taste tea and view the cloud. And the sword Wushuang, who was still asleep, at the same time, he was sitting on the stage and secretly drinking tea. It's still so comfortable. It's much more comfortable to sit and watch tea with some old friends than preaching. Jian Wushuang Yuze said. Everyone smiled. Feng Qi said with a lip. You have been drinking this tea for more than 100,000 years, and you still don't get tired of it. Jian Wushuang smiled and took another sip. Of course not greasy, but this tea is a good baby taken from the chaotic tea tree of the palm Jianzhenzong, which is especially good for the spleen and stomach. After hearing this explanation, the tea in the mouth almost spewed out. This guy who has already stood at the top of the universe, and even heavenly path is under his control, actually wants to drink tea to protect his spleen and stomach. But thinking about it for a while, eternal God likes to drink tea and finds a hobby in the boring days. After tasting tea for more than 10 years, Jian Wushuang was right. Everyone, in the next period of time, everything in the Yunxiao Palace will come to you first. Put down the teacup, and the Bloodwave Supreme asked, Master Zhou, are you ready? Prepare to go to the heavens to find the mud tire that disappeared in Kangwatai. Jian Wushuang said. Fengqi hurriedly said, but this has already passed 100,000 years, and there is no sign of that thing. Will it die? Jian Wushuang shook his head. It is precisely because of this that I am a little uneasy. If you let it continue to grow, the consequences will be unbearable. I don't want to let the divine universe go into turmoil again. Fengqi's lips were tight, and she obviously knew the importance of things. After all, the mud tire of Qi Ting is really weird, and it is made up of the blood of nearly 10 million monks. Although the mud tire was not as good as Jian Wushuang millions of years ago, it is indeed an ancestor. If you let it grow up all the time, the consequences will be unimaginable. I will go with you. Waiting for Feng Qi to speak, there has been little speech, but the very serious Zhou Jiawang said, Today's king of 9 tribulation, which had been enlightened by the fall of the earth god 1,000,000 years ago, has already broken through that layer of shackles and reached the terrible half-ancestor level. His sharpness. Jian Wushuang raised his eyebrows and patted his shoulder with a smile. Good brother. Although I also want you to go with me, but the experience of the journey to the heavenly gate can no longer be separated from you. You help guard there, also helped me. Here is the elder guard of the giant axe, said King Jirjia. The great axe supreme shook his head again and again. I don't go, my body is old. I need to rest more and rest before I can continue the battle with eternal God. You let me check the Tianmin more for me. I and the old Zun will go to a quick decision, and I will come back soon. Jian Wushuang smiled and embraced the 9 Tribulation King. Okay, you must come back within 1,000,000 years, and then the monks on the way to Tianmen should also come out. Wang Jiu said. Jian Wushuang nodded with a smile. Come drink for another year, and I will start again after a year. 1 year later, from the Yinxiao Palace above the cloud top, 2 figures walked out to the world of the heavens. Lao Zun, I want to ask you something. Among the clouds, Jian Wushuang dressed as a ranger looked at Lao Zun beside him. I know what you want to ask. All the news about that mud tire? Compared with millions of years ago, the kind of stranger's breath on the old man has almost disappeared. At this time he is like a sect. Like the elders who doze off in China, there is a little more peace. Jian Wushuang nodded. I still don't quite understand why the cheating, who has reached the top, should do that. That's because he has reached the time when he has to do that. Lao Zun looked far away and said quietly, his strength and realm have reached a point where they can't hide, far beyond the ancestor level. You reading book www.akanshu.com. What? Beyond the ancestor level? Jian Wushuang horrified. But the culmination of the universe is not only the ancestor level. Since the top of the universe is an ancestor, what am I? Lao Zun calmly said. And he who has realized from the eyes of chaos spring should naturally borrow that kind of power, so as to reach the top of this universe. He controlled the power, and naturally knew the ultimate truth, the limits of all, so he used that method. With the blood of hundreds of millions of spirits, the divine body is cast to serve as a mortal body of its own retreat, retaining its full strength and landing there. Sword Muzu was shocked. The words of Lao Zun made it very clear. The reason why cheating lured nearly 10 million monks was to build a body and act as a mortal body that he should have faded out, so as to retain all his strength. And what is there in that unknown place that makes cheating so devoid of humanity? Both were silent, and I wondered how long afterwards Jian Wushuang suddenly said, Cheating also said something to me before he died. He said that I will come to this step one day. Is it true or false? Lao Zun didn't answer, but the name of Jian Wushuang was rare. Wushuang, have you ever remembered 3 promises between us? Jian Wushuang nodded, remember. Then can I still count? It must be done. Jian Wushuang nodded firmly, and then he seemed to understand what he said, and said, Wait until this is done, let's start. Chapter 46-63. 1 figure, 1 old and 1 young, traveled in the heavens and earth. The size of the universe is uncountable. Although each heavenly domain coexists, it exists independently. This is invisible, and it naturally adds a lot of difficulties for Jian Wushuang and Lao Zun to find mud tires. Since then, their journey is no longer counted in white millennia. The most optimistic estimate, I am afraid it will also take millions of years. At the same time, Jian Wushuang is also a little curious. Judging from the battles of millions of years ago, the ancestral mud tires were vicious and violent. Jian Wushuang is confident. Even if the ancestral mud tire only emits a breath for a moment, he can feel it instantly in the poor pole universe. But after 1,000,000 years passed, the mud tire did not leak a little bit of breath, which made Jian Wushuang have begun to doubt whether the mud tire has died or slept. If it is the latter, the ancestral deep sleep, Jian Wushuang dare not imagine what energy he is accumulating, what kind of damage it will cause to the divine universe. Therefore, in any case, he must find and kill the cheating mud tire within 1,000,000 years. Otherwise the journey to heaven will end, and it will be delayed for a while. At the speed of Jian Wushuang and Lao Zun, even in the next 10,000 years, I found countless stars and territories, and I didn't find any bit of the mud tire at all. Has found some virtual powers who are almost exhausted in many star fields, and are about to die. After wavering mercilessly to kill them, Jian Wushuang went on. Every ancient field in the star field has never been lost. Lao Zun, how long do you say we can find the mud tire? In the vast ancient world, a noisy and bustling market, Jian Wushuang and Lao Zun sat by the window in the street tea house. Lao Zun took a sip of the tea on the table and said indifferently, "It can be as little as 100,000 years, as much as 1 million years, at most not more than 10 million years." "Why is it at most 10 million years?" Jian Wushuang asked in response. Lao Zun said, "Because at that time, the Buddhist sperm and blood will dry up, so he can't hide it anymore." Although this is said, but it has also been a long time for us. Jian Wushuang frowned as he touched his chin. You have to think of a way. When the two had a casual narrative, there was a rough noise in the street market. Saw dozens of men dressed in tight-fitting leather armor, walking out of the street corner. Everyone's body exudes a strong monk atmosphere. And in the middle of these men, a prison car wrapped in black cloth was pushed forward. After seeing this scene, some Xiao consciously gave way to stop and wait and see. Wang Wushuang, who was sitting against the window, probed with his divine power, and saw the one in the prison car, squeezing nearly 30 or 40 thin bodies, unknowingly trying to step forward. Lao Zun said quietly, "The size of the universe, what is happening right now is just a passing moment. Even if you save them, it doesn't make any sense." Sword Wushuang sat back again. What the old master said was not unreasonable. These mortal beings were just a moment in the reincarnation, and even if they were rescued, they could not change any process. Although it was such an imagination, his mind still followed those monks and looked around. In the very center of the market, a group of more than 10 people stopped, and the sturdy man headed seemed tired and abnormal, and there was even an unhealthy, greasy wound on his left shoulder. Hula! He directly lifted the shady curtain on the prison car, revealing the contents inside. Perceived the light beam, and the restlessness in the prison car was resounding. Nearly 30 women with dark skin and black wings looked at the monk who was surrounded with terror. These bird-like women, whose entire eyeballs are obscured by turbidity flaps, barely look at their eyes. They live in the deep mountain swamp all the year round, and they rarely come into contact with other creatures until their death. After seeing what was in the prison car, most of the monks' eyes were dull, and they retreated without hesitation. And the other small group of monks shined their eyes and talked quickly. "What's the price?" Some monks approached and asked. Led the strong man with a tired expression. "Unify 10 pieces of heavenly crystals. All want to get off the bargain." A number of monks heard that although the price was a little bit painful, but the Jackdaw clan seldom had a monk to catch it. They missed it and didn't know when they could meet it. Eventually, it was a painful delivery of dozens of crystals. For low cultivation, what can increase the body is far more important than a mystery. And the heads of the jackdaws have condensed beads that enhance the 5 senses, so they can be sold for a very high price. Tianjing, which contained extremely refined divine power, started, and the strong man ordered the rest of the people to open the prison car, and quickly selected these jackdaw women. The selected jackdaw woman, through the hands of the strong man, directly swiped with her finger, then took out a black bead from the jackdaw's head, and handed it to every monk. Once the condensed beads were stripped, the jackdaw woman could not survive and died directly. The thin figure in the prison car is also decreasing. Just as the strong man was busy peeling off the condensed beads, a fascinating voice sounded from the monks. "I bought all the rest." Looking around, I saw a young monk dressed as a ranger squeeze out the crowd, holding dozens of crystals, and walked over. The strong man glanced at him, and then looked at the middle of the prisoner car. "There is only one last, if you want 8 heavenly crystals." Sword Muzu nodded slightly, still gave him nearly 20 crystals in his hand. "This one, I will live directly." The brawny man raised his eyebrows and smiled. Many children in the family clan had their own hobbies, but he didn't interfere too much. He directly pulled the iron chain, and dragged out the last extremely thin jackdaw woman, and gave it to Jian Wushuang. "These monsters are the most durable. You just need to feed them a mouthful of clean water and dry food for a few months." Zhuang Shuaman added intimately. However, at this moment, another impatient voice resounded. "This last one, I want Xiao Wang." Jing Wushuang, who was about to leave, was also surrounded by more than a dozen low repairs. A young man in a Chinese suit with a high-spirited, sullen face quickly came to him, reaching out to grab the jackdaw girl. The next moment, it was a powerful foot to welcome the young man in the Chinese costume. Chapter 46-64. When nearly 1,000 monks broke into the tea shop, they had already gone to tea. This tiny episode was accompanied by the departure of Jian Wushuang and others, and finally ended without illness. And the young jackdaw girl, who was bought by the red, was also left beside him, because of Jian Wushuang's heart of concealment. Leaving this star field, Jian Wushuang went to the rest of the heavens and the world without any pause, looking for possible clues. This almost endless search, no one knows when it will continue. Jian Wushuang has already made up his mind. If the mud tire of cheating is not found within 1,000,000 years, he will suspend the matter and rush back to Yunxiao Palace. The extremely weak jackdaw girl followed him, and the Shouyuan, which was originally 1,000 years old, was also extended. At the same time, he broke through the shackles of numerology and embarked on a path of monasticism. After 100,000 years, 3 black robes stood under a very remote starry sky and looked at the dead and cold star field. Jian Wushuang said in a deep voice, "Jack, are you sure this is it?" The jackdaw woman whom he rescued and named simply closed her eyes at this moment, and the invisible and psychic 5 senses spread in the world. After a moment, Jackdaw opened his eyes and nodded firmly. "Adult, the breath of death came from here. There are thousands of avenues, and the jackdaw family's perception of the breath of life far surpasses the rest of the races, which is why the condensed pearl in the head of the jackdaw monster will become a spiritual treasure that the monks are rushing to." On this point, Jian Wushuang found out occasionally, which only saves most of the time. Since Kiting's mud tires are not showing their shape, Jian Wushuang changed his mind and began to look for the most solemn star field. With this search, I found out that more than 100 heavens have been transformed into dead domains. No longer speaks, and the 3 figures directly step into the dead star field. "Hey, it's not right, the life is so heavy here. Why don't you see the undead? But it is as prosperous as the ordinary market." Settled on the street market, Jian Wushuang looked at the monks who were almost rubbing their shoulders in front of him, and could not help but wonder. "Jackdaw, are you sure the dead energy here is the most intense?" The jackdaw was also confused. "Bad lord, I clearly feel that this is the place. How could there be a living person?" Sword Muzu is also a little puzzled. Is this the same as the cultivator of the imaginary universe? Cultivation is based on the dead air? But then he seemed to find something again, glancing at the monk on the street. The density of these monks seems to be a little too dense, and they are constantly emerging from the houses on both sides of the street, almost to the point of rubbing shoulders. They seem to be surrounded. Jian Wushuang, though a little puzzled, was already alert. At the next moment, a clear voice rang from the top of the 3 people's heads. "I said you broke into here without permission. Don't you even want to die?" Looking at it, I saw a young monk carrying a coffin on the roof of a restaurant, looking at them lazily. Then, the young monk suddenly swept up, picked up the exaggerated coffin on the back and bombarded straight down. The coffin with violent divine power smashed down, and directly flew nearly 1,000 monks, surrounded by the whole body, nearly 100 meters away. At the same time, the young monk stepped on the coffin and screamed, "Come with me if you want to survive. Otherwise you can't survive." After the words were finished, the young monk lifted the coffin and smashed it to the ground, and acted as a pioneer to smash the monks who came around again. Every monk who was hit by a coffin was like scattered mud, but it was scattered. At this moment, even the jackdaw noticed something was wrong. It turns out that these monks who are no different from living people have no spirits. Jian Wushuang and Lao Zun glanced at each other for the first time, confirming that there might be a mud tire of cheating hidden in this star field. In order to avoid playing grass and startling snakes, they did not release their respective powers, but quickly followed the young monk holding the coffin like a sledgehammer. Belongs to the ultimate dominance of the realm, and also makes Jian Wushuang look at him immensely. After all, in such a distant and extremely divine star field, it is really a remarkable thing to cultivate to the level of breaking through the shackles. The huge coffin almost became an unfavorable heavy weapon in the hands of the monk. Every time it smashed down, nearly 100 monks who lost their souls were wiped out. Over the next half-day, the young monks showed great power, and quickly wiped out all the monks in this area. In case of emergency, all 3 of them sat on the roof under his instructions. Speak, how did you come here? I don't think your realm is too high. Are you the same survivors like me? The young monk looked at the 3 men, and asked with a dull look. Jian Mushuang did not answer his question, but said with a puzzled face, "What happened here? Why is the death so rich, and why did the monks attack us?" When the young monk heard this, calm and could not help but sigh. "That's because everyone here has died, including the monk who besieged you just now. It's already dead." Jian Wushuang heard the words, and there was already some clarity in his heart. "Then do you know everything that happened in this area, and the causes and consequences?" "Of course I know that although things have been happening for hundreds of thousands of years, I still remember clearly," the young monk said. "Do you want to know? Please also explain that this matters. It's okay to say it, and I haven't spoken to outsiders for more than 100,000, just to relieve the boredom." The young monk breathed out, and then came out. "That is hundreds of thousands of years ago. At that time, it was also a monk's monastery, and the various sects were prosperous. They were not all reduced to the dead domain as they are now. All the reasons are because of that day." Seemed to be reminiscing, and a panic appeared in the eyes of the young monk. That day, the entire sky was replaced by darkness, and even the big day was swallowed, and then a grim and strange face replaced the entire sky. The gruesome strange face has a mouth, the divine power between heaven and earth, and the breath of life have been sucked by him, and no monk can escape. Seeing that they turned into a body without a soul before my eyes, I realized that the robbery was coming. Because the method I learned is very unique, I can barely switch between life and death, so I hid in the coffin and escaped. Chapter 46-65. After listening to the young monk's words, Jian Wushuang nodded secretly. Judging from the approximate time point, he could urge such a terrifying energy to encroach on the soul of the entire monk of the star field, which is in line with cheating's disappearing mud tire. After roughly confirming that this is the situation of cheating mud tires, Jian Wushuang again asked, "Did you notice the dead energy or other most complex places in this world in these years?" The young monk thought a little, and then nodded. "Naturally, I have seen it. In the extreme north of the sheltered waters, every 100,000 years or so, a heavy cloud will rise, and the cloud will cover the sky, and I will lie in the coffin and take refuge. Counting, the thick water will be rising again in the sheltered territory." Sword Wushuang nodded, and stared at Lao Zun to cover, then arched his hand. "Thank you friends for telling us. Then let's not pass this. There will be a period in the future." "Wait, just stop here? Where are you going?" "The sheltered waters in Zioya's mouth." "Where are you going to do? Is it desperate?" The young monk shocked. Jian Mushuang smiled slightly, and when he arched his hands again, he was ready to get up. "Forget it, I'll go with you." The young monk stood up and looked out. "It's already impatient to live this way. It's better to go with you to find out. It's dead. Understand?" Sword Wushuang was dumb, but did not refuse, and the group of 4 swept across the Pisces. This is called the Star Kingdom of the mainland of Yang, and its territorial area is relatively advanced in the divine universe. A huge river that shelters the water almost runs through the entire mainland of Yang, and is extremely magnificent. But nowadays, the riverbed that has been completely dried up is like a dead dragon, meanderingly winding in the continent. At the same time, the distance that was originally like dusk at the moment suddenly rolled up a yellow mist covering the sky and the sun. It's not good. The turbid gas has risen, and it's almost back to the ground. The young monk flying on the coffin was terrified when he saw this scene, but when he saw Jian Wushuang and his group were indifferent, he immediately said nervously, "This turbid gas is not a joke. Even if the supreme divine realm comes here, you can only drink on the spot. Little friends are not in a hurry, there is me." Jin Wushuang looked back and smiled slightly, and then walked forward firmly. After hearing this sentence, the young monk somehow settled down inexplicably. "Damn it, you die," he snorted, his whole body lying on the coffin, looking forward to the extreme nervous. The overwhelming turbidity is like a big mouth of blood basin pushing forward and consuming everything. At the next moment, a clear to the extreme, pure to the extreme Jinmeng rushed to the sky, just like the astonishing dragon ascended to heaven, and like the Tianhe rewind, tried a vent to the front. Sword Wushuang holds the Tai Luo Excalibur, and one sword is empty. The monk lying on the coffin was shocked to watch this quirky battle in front of him. In his memory, even the most tyrannical ancestor in the mainland of Yangyang could not survive here for a moment. The monstrous sword intention easily wiped out the muddy air. Heaven and earth complex Qingming. But the next scene made the young monk take a breath. I saw that in the dry riverbed of Pishui River, the bodies of countless monks gathered and piled up in it, like a flowing river of corpses. Perceived the arrival of external forces. The bodies of countless monks who had piled up the entire Pishui riverbed shook at the moment. At the next moment, an almost shocking horror arm composed of corpses suddenly lifted from the Pishui riverbed, grasping and holding the sword. The terrible sonic boom tears the sky.